either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris.
And happy Mother's Day, everyone.
Happy Mother's Day.
Even though this is like almost 2 full weeks out for Mother's Day.
Yeah, it's okay. Early Mother's Day.
Early Mother's Day. Well, actually, this will come out on Mother's Day.
Perfect.
That's why we're doing this one. So
yes.
Today we decided to do something a little bit more, bit lighter and family friendly than what we've been doing. And today we are doing the 2012 Pixar Disney movie, Brave.
The ultimate mother-daughter movie.
Exactly. And that's exactly why we picked it.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm gonna put this right up front. I'm not super familiar with recent Disney.
Yes.
I think besides Brave, I've only seen Frozen, and I know the others tangentially through Kingdom Hearts 3.
Yeah, I don't know if Kingdom Hearts 3 is the best representation of Disney franchise.
I don't know either.
I'm based off of Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, I'm gonna go with not really. Aesthetically, yes.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And Brave is not in Kingdom Hearts 3, so...
It is not. I, however, am immensely, involved with Disney.
Yes.
I am a huge Disney movie watcher. There's only a couple of recent years that I've missed, but they are on my list. And most of the older ones I have seen so many times I could probably sing them for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I stopped watching Disney after our VHS player stopped working in Germany.
Ah, I understand.
And then Shrek came along.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say, though, I am kind of glad that we did this one. Because I have owned Brave since it came out.
Yeah.
It was I don't typically buy Disney movies just because I'm waiting for the day where I have enough shelf space where my mom just, dumps all of my old VHS tapes on me. But Brave was one of the ones that I actually did buy. And I've seen it so many times, but I never really did research on it.
No.
Which, I had seen the, specials and the shorts on it and stuff. There's a lot more behind the scenes drama with this movie.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that going in, because I think you exposed me to this on, I think we watched it on St. Patrick's Day, honestly.
Which was a mistake, because this is a Scottish film, but oops.
Or, no, it was your birthday.
I think so, because I think I bought a new version of the copy for my birthday, because my old copy, I had left it at a friend's house who lives several states away.
Right, yeah, you had picked it up and you wanted to have a movie night with us, and so we decided to watch Brave.
I forced y'all to watch it.
And honestly, I didn't regret it. So.
Yeah.
But so before we do dive into Brave,
yes.
What are we drinking today, Chris?
Well, there's worms in this water, Nico.
Yes, wormy water.
We have gummy worms in some water, and of course, a good whiskey.
We got Highland Park 12 years.
Yes.
Cheers.
Delicious. And
for those, if this actually comes through in the recording, the cat meowing is actually Hobbs, my other cat.
The normally very quiet kitty.
Yes. So, Brave.
Yes.
Is a 2012 animated Disney princess movie.
It is.
Produced and directed from Pixar.
Yes.
And it was directed by, and we'll get into this in a bit. On the credits, it's Mark Andrews, Brendan Chapman, and co-directed by Stephen Prucell.
Yes.
Brendan Chapman also did the story for Brave, and is based off the relationship between herself and her own daughter.
Yes. And also some of her travels to Scotland. She's Scottish. She's American with Scottish ancestry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so Brave actually stars the talents of Kelly MacDonald.
Yes.
Emma Thompson.
Amazing.
And Billy Connolly.
Which, at first, you don't see, and then you see him next to his character, and you're like, oh, yeah, of course.
Yep.
Who else?
As well, featuring Craig Ferguson. Kevin McKidd.
Yes.
Julie Walters.
Yeah.
And the beloved Hagrid, Robbie Coltrane.
I love Robbie Coltrane.
what's important about bringing up all these people? They're all Scottish actors.
Yes.
And they were brought on to keep the voices authentic.
In fact, some of them were so authentic that they had to be reined back in just a wee bit.
Just a little bit, so that way us Yanks could hear it.
Yes, with the exception of one sweet character, who is one of the prospective suitors of Dear Meredith, which we'll get into later. But he was one of the voice actors who came forward and was like, hey, just so you guys know, there's a lot of accents in Scotland, not just your what you think of when you see it.
Oh, yeah.
And when they being Pixar and Disney, of course they went to Scotland to immerse themselves in everything. How much of that stuck, that's up for debate. But while they were there, they did make a huge note about the accent difference, and they did do a lot of work to try and put that in the movie.
Well, and they also brought a Scotsman on staff to
add Scottish lingo.
Yes.
Which I like, because Meredith is actually one of only two princesses who uses her native language actively in her own film.
Yes. And I got a little side story on that.
Yes.
Because I've actually been to Scotland.
I have not. It's on my list.
It is gorgeous. I loved it. From what I can remember, because I was still in middle school. Well, American elementary school, Dodds Middle School. Gotcha. And we actually, so we were out and about one time, and we stumbled upon a lawn bowling club.
Okay. We kind of have lawn bowling here, but it's not really a thing. Old people don't lawn bowl. Hipsters in cities lawn bowl.
Yes, this one was older people.
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's in TV shows, we know what it is, but it's that, weird, quaint thing of Europeans lawn bowl? And, then, of course, we never attempt to take it up, because who's gonna lawn bowl with us?
It also, at some point, sounds like one of the pretentious things that yuppie couple would do, of we have you lawn bowling at 10 today.
It also sounds like an activity that you get gifted as a wedding gift that you didn't ask for. It wasn't on your registry, and it's from someone you don't know, and you're like, oh, thanks, we're moving into a 3rd floor apartment.
Yeah.
I love it.
Love it. But anyway, so I like the accents for this too, because in our story, so we go there, they invite us into the club, and they're buying us kids Cokes, and my dad a beer, and we're sitting there talking, and we talked to my parents talked a good chunk of the evening away, and my mom's like, oh, thank you for bringing us in, we're so sorry we didn't, and I apologize, Mom, if I'm butchering the story, because I know you will comment on it. She's like, we've been here so long, but I just love listening to your accents. And whoever she was talking to at the time, responds back, and they're like, oh, lass, why do you think we're talking to you? And I apologize if I butchered that Scottish accent. But it was just a nice thing that, because we were in a more rural part of Scotland.
Yes.
But it was nice still. But yeah, it's a little tangent of my experiences in Scotland.
I do think, though, that the Pixar team did a really good job of capturing people's experiences when they went to Scotland, because while the research that they did there, some of it made it into the film, a lot of it did not, for various reasons.
Yeah.
But especially for most American audiences, Scotland is kind of high up there on places that, if you're going to go overseas and visit, Scotland's pretty high on the list of places people go, and so being able to capture the beautiful landscape, the way the mist hangs on trees, the old architecture, the voices, the people in general, that really does help make an impression.
There was a profound lack of sheep.
Yeah, I understand that one.
And so, the story of Brave is about a teenage girl who, in an act of rebellion, accidentally turns her mother into a bear.
Yes, she does.
Yeah.
Whoops.
And as we mentioned, it is set in Scotland, specifically around 1066, according to the commentary.
That's a real big-ish.
Well, and so, first off, this is the first Pixar movie to actually be fully set in a historical past without, any fantasy embellishments.
Yes. In fact, this is a first for a lot of things for Pixar.
Yes.
This was also their first, I think, female lead. Female protagonist.
I think so, too.
Other than her, they've had Finding Dory and I think one other. There's only been, 3 animated Pixar female leads.
Okay. But they did admit that they had taken some liberties with this movie, i.e. people wearing kilts, which I looked up, did not appear until about the 16th century.
Speaking of the kilts, Pixar went ahead and made their own tartans for the film, all except for one of the families got a tartan. One of the families, they went ahead and registered with the official Scottish Tartan Society.
Nice.
I don't remember what the actual, the society has a name.
Yeah.
I do not remember what the society's name is. Some people love that, think it's real cute. Some people are like, how dare you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as someone who plans to be married in a kilt,
yes.
I do have a book on how to wear the kilt and all the etiquette of it. So.
Yes, and there was a lot of focus in the pre-production of Brave on making sure the people in this film looked realistic and not too what Pixar was worried about was creating classically Disney background people.
Yeah.
Which are usually very clean and, even if they are poor, proper looking people. They wanted hairy, dirty, small people.
Yeah, it's very much a Disney-like movie, but with a Pixar twist to it.
Very much so. And so, because Pixar wanted to focus a lot on making characters that were a little over the top, but not in a cartoony way, while still being as over the top as they could get, everyone has hair frickin' everywhere in this movie. They did take a lot of liberties with not just the clothing. The clothing's the wrong century. Some of the architecture is also the wrong century.
Yeah.
And there's also the debate on whether or not bears were still in Scotland at this time period. I think there were still some.
I actually have some. I did research on that.
Okay.
I have noted a little bit later. So I did do some stuff on that because yes. I do like finding what's accurate and or where they took liberties and stuff like this.
Yes.
Just to give a little bit of historical context of this setting, this is during a relatively peaceful time for Scotland. It would be shortly after the death of Macbeth, and yes, that Macbeth.
That one. Yeah.
In 1057, and during the rule of Malcolm III, and that's the Americanized or anglicized version.
Mm-hmm.
As well, Scotland at this time did not have what we currently think of Scotland and are familiar with. The North and the West were actually under Scandinavian rule.
Yes.
So it was a lot smaller boundaries, and some of their dialogue in it makes much more sense.
Yeah.
Knowing that little bit of history of, when this is set.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, before we actually really get into the film, though, I do want to talk a little bit about, just initially, we can talk about it a little bit more later, but Brenda Chapman.
Yes, one of my heroes.
She was the driving force behind getting this movie off the ground. As you mentioned, she's the one who suggested that they take the crew to Scotland to get the feel of the country.
Yeah, which did help a lot, because it was where they got a lot of inspiration for not just the general landscape, which you can pull from pictures if you want, but how there's bugs animated into the background of scenes, the way mist hangs at a certain level. That
is one of my favorite things, because in the commentary, they're complaining about the midgies. And, or for those who don't know what a midgie is, there are these little gnat-like insects that are insufferable, biting clouds of pestilence.
Yes, they are.
They are bullshit, but I'm glad they included it, because that's the thing.
It makes it very real.
And that's the things you don't get, and why I appreciate them actually going and exploring Scotland.
Because you would never, ever in a picture, unless you looked for a picture of these stupid bugs, it's something that in photos you just don't see.
Yeah.
Or you wouldn't notice until you're there and you accidentally walk through one with your mouth wide open.
Oh, yeah. And so, Brenda Chapman, why she's important is, I didn't realize how big of a name she is in
She's huge.
Movies. Oh, especially the animated world, because she is the first woman to direct a major animated feature film. There were 3 before, but they were all independent movies. And on top of that, she directed The Prince of Egypt.
Which, if you haven't seen The Prince of Egypt, you need to stop everything you're doing and go see it, because it's a masterpiece.
It's gorgeous. Well, from what I remember of it, it's well done, beautiful. But granted, I think last I saw it was middle school.
I watch it every year around Easter time.
Okay.
It's one of the classics in our house. And every year I am blown away by not just the art and the visuals, but also the delicateness that she took a biblical story and made it for anybody.
Yeah. And I know people have commented that it's one of the few animated films that we have currently that portrays a people of a different ethnicity in their time frame.
Yeah.
And I feel that she took that sensibility and brought it into Brave as well. Even though a lot of the characters are very more character-like.
Yeah, they are a little bit more of a caricature, but not so much so that they are unreal.
Yeah, they're very much what we would think of a typical Scotsman, but they're not wrong.
No, they're not wrong. They very much feel like a lot of the folks in the small towns around here. They look like people that we would see when we go out shopping. They look like the people who are out at the parks with us. Yeah. We are not surrounded by beauty stars. And
another thing that maybe not touched on a lot, but I noticed because we have a couple movies coming up where we have a lot of redheaded characters in it.
We do.
And we don't see that a lot either, especially redheaded leads.
Yes. And on top of that, because this story was something from her own heart and was fully inspired by her and her own personal daughter's relationship, she worked tirelessly to keep the focus on Merida. Mm-hmm. Because it is very tempting to have her and her father's relationship more of a shining role. Her dad's a cool guy. Yeah. And he's very interesting. Her brothers are also interesting. Her mom is arguably the uninteresting one in the family, but that's kind of the point. Yeah.
Well, and I can get into like why her mom is the way she is later on.
For sure. And we will definitely touch on that, because a lot of reviews of Brave review it from just Merida's eyes, but this film, as you watch it as you age, you watch it from both Merida's, and then you watch it from Eleanor's eyes.
Well, and on top of that, too, like, they did try, and they played with multiple scenarios.
They did. There's a couple of alternate openings. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of deleted scenes that were much more heavily focused on the rowdy boy bunch, and less on Merida and her mom, and she did help really try and steer this in. But there was, quote-unquote, creative differences.
Yes, and we can get into that a little bit towards the end, I think.
Yeah, so. But another thing to note about her was she's not just a first. She's also someone who has made a name for herself, working her ass off in this career. She's worked on things like Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast at high-level roles. Yeah. And that's just a fraction of the things she's worked on.
Yeah, she is a pioneer for females in animation, which is still heavily a male job.
Yeah, animation, especially directing animated films, is hugely a boy party, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does make it really, it does make it harder to say, like, to count the female leads on more than 5 fingers.
Yeah, it changes, like, how the stories are written, because as boys, you can, even if you have daughters, you can associate with it, but you've never been
and
the daughter.
And it definitely makes mother-daughter relationships are things that we, especially in animated films, we don't see a whole lot. Partially because, like, most animated films have leaned towards stories that you don't necessarily need live action to represent. And a lot of people have felt that family dynamics have been something live action can portray very easily and very well. Whereas with animation, it's always, we've started from top cartoony and been trickling our way down the subject line. And we've started to reach a point where we're having to talk to kids about kids from a parent's point of view, and you can't do that from both sides unless you've truly been there.
Yeah, and honestly, the only animated film I can think of off the top of my head that is very much, not necessarily a mother-daughter, but mother and children relationship is Wolf Children.
Wolf Children's a good one. The other one that's recent, and I don't know if you've gotten to it yet, since you're not a Disney Pixar person, is Inside Out, which is the other Pixar movie that stars a female lead.
Yes, I
And that one's a little different because it's all in the daughter's head, but it does spend a good bit of time talking about, while it's not just her and her mom definitely leads the family. That's one of, again, it's one of a handful of animated stories that truly goes into this. That's at least from the Western's point of view.
And they're both very much coming-of-age stories. So.
Yeah, and to be fair, coming-of-age stories are they're never an overdone topic.
Yeah.
Because everyone's coming-of-age story, even if it is a fanciful lady who rides through the woods with a bow and arrow, is different.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah. So, real quick, one thing I thought that was interesting about Brave is that it actually took 6 years to make.
Yes.
And in that time, they had to create 2 specific software programs.
Yeah, they did.
One of those was for Merida's hair alone.
Yes, which they then halfway through had to rework because they decided they needed a child version of her.
Yes.
And once they got that one to work, they're like, oh, thank God we can have all these other scenes with baby Merida in it, because she's so fucking cute.
Yes, exactly. Alrighty. And so, on to Brave.
Ugh, I love this story.
So, at the beginning of Brave, I really wish Disney had gone through this.
Yeah.
Or gone through with this. Mark Andrews, and so, before I go into it, all my background knowledge is mainly from the animation staff and the directors, producers, just the various special features on the 5-disc special edition set where, 2 of the discs are useless.
Yeah, one of the discs is for a 3D screen, and one of them is for downloading the movie to watch it on your iPod.
Yes.
How fun.
Yeah, remember iPods, children?
I don't.
I do. I have one.
I did too.
And so, Mark Andrews actually originally wanted Castle Dunbrook, or Denbrook. How? I
think, again, my Gaelic is A, real rusty, and B, not Scottish Gaelic, but I think it's Dunbrook.
Dunbrook? And you have told me my attempts at Gaelic are very German.
Yeah, well, so are mine, unfortunately, because all of my Gaelic practice friends are German. So...
Fun. And so, Andrews originally wanted that castle in place of the Disney castle, and... Which
would be cool, but,
I would like it, just because it'd be so unique for this movie, as well as he wanted a bagpipe, being wheezed to sound for the Pixar eye.
I do think the Pixar wheezing bagpipes would have been, a solid play. The Disney castle trope is something that I don't know how hard Disney's rules are with it, but it seems like a lot of, especially new Disney films, this is something that they play with quite heavily, is, we're starting our film, we should do something to the castle, which, if you're really familiar with old Disney and not so much with new, does feel fun and fresh. If you're a new Disney fan, it's getting a little tired. Granted, when Brave came out, it would have still been fun and fresh. Yeah. So,
okay.
Maybe.
And so we open up Brave with a royal family having a picnic as...
the cutest child ever animated.
Yes, a mother chases a little redhead girl on her birthday.
God, okay, children are really hard to A, draw, and B, animate to make them look like children. As far as I can count, Pixar's only really done 2 baby versions of their characters well. Okay. Baby Merida, who is adorable, but also a realistic-looking child in the scope of this film. She's proportions are good. She doesn't have the weird baby bug eye problem. Her eyes are still big, but some of Pixar's babies are real scary looking. So there's Merida, who convincing also looks like herself when she grows up.
Yeah.
That's important, because some children you're like, who are you again? Where did you come from? And then of course baby Dory. But Dory's a fish. But also, Dory broke the internet with how cute she was as a small child, so heh. But good job, Pixar.
I don't think I've seen Baby Dory.
Baby Dory is so fucking adorable, you'd hate her.
Probably. I despise Baby Yoda.
She's better than Baby Yoda because not only is she a baby version of a blue tang fish, she still has memory problems. Because this is a genetic thing she's had since birth. She's so cute.
Interesting.
Her eyes are gigantic.
And so, for me, I personally, from a storytelling point, love the opening and the establishment of the characters. Because from the get-go, we already have that, in this place, and right after the scene, that the mother does not like weapons on the table.
No.
And that she believes her daughter should be a lady, but Merida is a daddy's girl, and her daddy is a warrior.
Yes.
And teaches her bow.
We also, though, get to see a arc with Eleanor, Merida's mother, from here, because she's out on a picnic, or what we can assume is probably a hunting party. She's roughhousing with her daughter on the ground.
It is a picnic because it is Merida's birthday.
Okay, so it's Merida's birthday picnic, which is an elaborate fucking picnic. This is a lot of tents for a picnic.
Again, they are royalty.
They are royalty. again, there's some question on whether or not royalty at this time period still would have had this much, but, we'll let it slide because this is cute as hell.
Yes.
But we also get to see that, at the beginning of Merida's story, we see that she's always been a rough and tumble girl, but her and her mother were a lot closer in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Her mother also, while still having all of her core values, she's a proper woman. She believes that holding the title of queen really has a lot of weight to it. Yeah. And she wants Merida to understand that. But we also see that she was a lot looser when Merida was a little girl. Yes. She's playing with her in the dirt. They're rough and tumbling. And while, she's not happy she got a bow, she still participates in her learning the bow with her dad later on. Yeah. I mean, the amount of arrows that Merida tries to put into the ground, Eleanor's standing there for a lot of arrows before she's like, okay, guys, come on. Yeah. Well, I can get into maybe why Eleanor's a little bit more tired out later on. I mean, fair. So we do, on top of establishing the family members, we're getting like little shots of something watching from the woods. Yes, this is very nice camera work. And one thing of note, because of the technical difficulties with Merida's crazy hair. Just a lot of hair. Traditional simulations couldn't handle it, and at one point they actually suggested cutting it. And when someone brought that up, the entire meeting went dead silent. And we have to have baby Merida, guys. Yeah, they're like, no, we can't do that. This is the hair is much of a part of her character as she is. Which is really good that they stuck with, because they could have toned her hair down. Yeah. But honestly, especially part of the reason why Merida remains part of Disney's Big 12 princess lineup is because she is the rowdy one. Mm-hmm. Is because as a visual character, because when you re-illustrate these princesses down into toys, into dolls, and into live-action people who have to go through a parade and say hi and hug small children, visually they have to look like what it is they're representing. They can't just act it. Yeah. I mean, a lot, and that's not taking credit away from these amazing actors who do this every day and pull it off amazingly, but, her crazy hair puts her on such a pedestal that even to this day, even though arguably there are other ladies who could take her spot on the princess list, she still holds on. Yes. And she's a lot of people's favorites. Yes. And so during her bow practice, she misses and is sent to fetch the arrows, fetch the arrow she has overshot. We also have an interesting transition that will play out again later on, where she goes from a bright, cheery clearing to a dark, mysterious, and almost magical woods at this point, as she follows Will-o'-the-Wisps. Oh, I love that they kept this element of magic in there, because they did tone the magic down a lot in this movie from the original script, or the original, thought boards. Yeah. But it's Scotland. You gotta have some magic. Oh yeah, especially at this time, because, I mean, that it is such a big part of folklore. Yeah. And I've been doing a little bit of research on a future episode, and I learned that a lot of England and Scotland, by extension Scotland's mythology, isn't English or Scottish at all. They kind of lost whatever they originally had. Yeah, yeah. But Will-o'-the-Wisps or Spirit Fire are a common element throughout multiple mythologies. Yes. And also are a really nice symbol that they use throughout the movie, which we'll get to. Yes. And so we hear some crackling in the woods, and Merida is called away by the Will-o'-the-Wisps. And we learn that through her mom that Will-o'-the-Wisps lead people to their fates, and her father scoffs at this idea, dismissing it as either a dancing tattyboggle or a troll. Yeah, which I love that this man believes in trolls and tattyboggles and not Will-o'-the-Wisps. Well, tattyboggles, for us Yanks, is a kind of scarecrow. Fun. Not sure how those move around the forest. Also, dancing scarecrows. Oh, yeah, scarecrows move all the time. Well, that's what I was talking about. It's a dancing scarecrow. It's something something fanciful. Yeah, again, this man believes in dancing scarecrows and goblins. Well, he's making a joke of it. I know. But, side note of this, because I had to look up what a tattyboggle is, I learned about Scottish Wikipedia. Oh, there's a whole Wikipedia for Scotland?
Yes, because I was reading this article, because that's the only one that pulled up when I tried looking up what a tattyboggle was.
Uh-huh.
And, the first half of the paragraph I understood perfectly.
Yeah.
And then I started getting a little further in it, and I'm like, are those words? And then I realized it is spelled out phonetically like a Scotsman talks.
Oh no.
There is an entire Scottish Wikipedia, and I am fascinated by it.
This sounds like I would spend a lot of time trying to read this.
Oh, you would have such... My mom had a hard time with it, but before I told her it was Scottish Wikipedia. And so, in regards to the animation of the Wisps, the crew actually tried all kinds of forms, but it all, like, they just tried cloaking it in fire, and it always just appeared as, like, something covered in fire.
Yeah.
And eventually what they settled on was a being of fire, where, like, the fire was an extension of it. And so, as for will-o-wisps specifically, in Scottish and English folklore, they are found in cautionary tales of misguided travelers being lured to their dooms mainly in the swamps or marshes. And this is because will-o'-the-wisps actually occur naturally.
Yes, they do.
They are produced under the right circumstances when gases from organic decay catch fire and glow blue because of their chemical compound. And their beckoning actually comes from the drafts of us approaching them, so that's why they look like they're beckoning.
And they bring the hobbitses to their fate.
Yes. I have had so much Lord of the Rings shit lately.
We're gonna get to it eventually, I promise.
Eventually. Well, not even that. Like, almost every single week so far, for the past 2 months, someone's been making some kind of reference to Lord of the Rings around me.
Once you recognize that it's Lord of the Rings time, you realize how much we have quoted that movie since it came out.
It's ridiculous. And so, as Merida returns and the family begins to sit down or head out, Mor'du appears.
Ah, the bear, the giant black bear, whose size I question greatly.
And the father and warriors spring into action, which, okay, is it a black bear?
Okay, so in the extras and in the movie, they do call him a black bear.
Okay.
And I know that there are extinct species of bears, because one of the fun things that I did as a child was go to a bear museum that had a bunch of dead stuffed bears and replicas of long dead bears.
A bear museum.
My family had a lot of fun spare time that mostly involved driving through the Midwest.
Yeah, yes, you've explained this. Okay.
Where was the bear museum?
Yes.
Somewhere between Wyoming and North Dakota.
Okay, that makes sense.
No idea which state.
That makes a little bit more sense.
I think it was somewhere that had a prehistoric dig, because I also remember there being mammoth remains there, so it was probably somewhere, because we have, in that area, we do have quite a lot of archaeological digs. So my guess is that bear part of the museum was either tacked on to a mammoth part of a museum, or was like a special feature of a mammoth museum, and all I remembered was the bears.
Or it was probably just part of a bigger museum and you just remember the bears.
Oh, no. You misunderstand how my family travels, sir. We don't go to big cities. We go to towns with less than 500 people in them.
Interesting.
We didn't stay anywhere nicer than a Motel 6 all of the time. Not because we didn't want to, but because that was the only place to stay.
Fascinating.
So I do know that there are bigger bears that have since gone extinct, and I am not super familiar with the European extinct bears. I'm more familiar with the North American giant fucking bear that's terrifying.
Okay, I'll actually get into that in a second. What I wanted to say first, I'll go into the Mor'du portion. So, couple things of interest. Mor'du's name actually comes from the Gaelic words of Mor in do, but they're spelled differently than how it's actually said.
That's how Gaelic works. You always spell everything different.
Well, and so does the French language. I hate the French language.
I apologize.
Which translates to giant black.
Yes.
Also, like I mentioned, I did a little bit of research on this. Scotland did have the European brown bear,
yes,
which was used in Roman circuses, but went extinct around the 9th and 10th century.
Yes, and I don't think there's been bears in Scotland since, unless we've reintroduced them, and that's news to me.
Yeah, I think they're completely extinct because the Scottish elk went extinct around that time as well.
Yes.
But a little side tangent there. One thing I like about this part too is it is very much like what I like how the father reacts.
Yes.
Because it's not like what we normally see in like a heroic tale where he grabs the sword. They all go for their spears first.
Because they're smart people and they know that a sword versus a bear means you're dead.
Yeah. Which, I mean, is great because, like, that's normally what we see, like, in something like Die Nibelungen, where Siegfried takes his sword and stabs the dragon.
And another detail that they, from the get-go, show with the family, which the historian people really like. I don't know if everyone catches it because they don't make a huge deal about it because they did cut a lot of scenes with the cute doggies. They're all wolfhounds.
Okay.
And while wolfhounds are not necessarily bear hounds, there are dogs specifically for bears.
Yeah.
They are hunting dogs and they were royalty dogs. So it was not uncommon for someone who's a lord or a king to have multiples, and you were the only person who got to have these cool dogs.
Yeah.
And how they are portrayed in the movie is pretty accurate to how they probably would have been used and kept. Especially if Eleanor's dad is a dog lover. We have records of lords who are really fucking into their dogs and they lived inside with them. And then we have others who like have a house down the road with their dogs in it. It was up to you. But you're royalty. You get fancy big dogs. And those dogs were definitely capable of fighting a bear.
Okay.
Maybe not the correct choice for bear fighting, but they were hunting dogs.
But they could.
And they would have been trained to help with all this. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another interesting thing about this movie is that Mor'du really feels like he is kind of the last bear.
He does. And the other thing is especially for the American audience, especially for the Midwestern strain, especially the upper Midwestern part of America, we are immensely familiar with what a black bear is. Because even if you don't live in a town that has currently got black bears in it, you go hiking or hunting, or you go to the national parks, and so you learn a lot of black bears, and then once you're like, I'm gonna go hiking, and every ranger in the park is like, are you ready for black bear hiking? So it is interesting because they spend all this time emphasizing, and he looks like a black bear, he's got the right colors, he's roughly the right shape. He's like 5 times bigger than a normal black bear. This bear is huge. He's bigger than a grizzly. You know, that's a good point. Well, the mom is about the size of a grizzly. Okay, yeah, the mom is 9 foot that they describe later, which, honestly, now that you're bringing that up... This is a massive bear. Well, when you bring that up, I forget that I have a different experience than some people, because when I think of hiking in bear country, I think of Kodiaks. Yeah, not just grizzlies, Kodiaks, the big motherfuckers. Yes, and while, depending on where you hike, you've got the grizzly population down here, we tend to think of grizzlies as a little bit more skittish, they're a little harder to find, you've got to be in grizzly area for them. Black bears are pretty common around here. So, like, even if you go on one of the lakes around here, we've got black bears in this part of the country. They're a little bit more skittish. They're a little bit smaller. Yeah, a little easier to, like, be like, no bear, stop. Okay. This bear, however, is not just the last bear of his kind. He's, like, monster. Yeah. Bear. And not only is he gigantic, he looks terrifying. And her dad is just like, bring it, you bastard. I mean, kudos to him. He is a warrior through and through. Yep. And so, now we have the title card of Brave. Yes. It took us 15 minutes to explain the first, 3 minutes of this movie. But honestly, I like that about this movie. Is they pack a ton into the first part of this movie and then let the fun and the chase be the rest of it. Yeah. Well, also still just building things as they go, because our next shots are swooping landscapes. Beautiful landscapes. As Merida begins to narrate about fate in the land and of tapestries. Yes. And honestly, I love this because not only are they showing that it's a more close to our modern time, because they're starting to show, the magic through the land, through, the waystones and the magic circles and the ancient burial grounds, which I like this too, because they had a concept about magic that they wanted to convey. They wanted to convey that magic and spiritual nature that is there, as well as pay homage to older fairy tales while still being applicable to modern times. Yes. And how this portrays to me a little bit is that we're entering a more somewhat enlightened age where
the belief in magic is still there, but it's kind of on its way out.
It's a little bit old school. It's not nearly as popular. It's not got hard and fast rules. It's something that you just live with.
Yeah. No, exactly. And like it makes me think of how Marcus Parks from last podcast on the left talked about like his Iceland trip and like how Iceland felt like they truly believed in magic back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually understand this with Scotland too, because there's so much about it that feels ancient.
You can feel history in places.
Yeah.
And I love that they kept that about this not just the landscape, not just about Merida as a character, but as the world. This Scotland has magic. And no one questions it. That's just how it is. Yeah.
And this was also, the swooping landscapes was the director's homage to The Sound of Music.
Which was very sweet, because I also am a big movie nerd, as you can tell. And so every time he was like, this was my homage to fill in blank movie here, because he did this a lot throughout the movie.
Yes.
The rest of the directors were like, freaking nerd.
And you're a musical nerd, too, on top of that.
I love Sound of Music. The good old Nazi musical. My favorite.
Yes. Actually, I would say the Nazi musical is the producers.
They hold the title card. This one just happens to have Nazis in it.
Yes. And I do apologize. Charlie might be more present in this episode than ever before, because I went into the office for like 5 hours today, and he has separation anxiety, and it's obnoxious.
The poor kitty.
So now we go to Castle Dunbroch, where we get caught up with what has transpired since the opening scene. Fergus, who is Merida's father,
yes,
we learn that his fight with Mardu, he kind of won, but he lost his leg in the process, which made him legendary as he's sparring with his men.
He's now the bear killer.
Yeah. Not killer, just fighter.
Yeah.
He fought off Mordu. He's strong enough to fight him off.
And then has since collected bear bodies, if you look in the background.
Yes.
His whole house is decorated in bears.
Fun fact about that little opening choreography scene.
Yes.
That was actually done in real life by the director and the animators.
Oh, that's cute. We also learn that they've had more children since Merida was 6.
Merida is no longer a wee babe either.
No, she has 3 wee babe triplet brothers who all have her father's fiery hair.
Yes, and attitude.
And if you look closely, they have the same haircut as us.
Kind of. Theirs is curly, though.
Oh, no, they have curly hair, but they've got the shaved sides.
We will have to take a picture together sometime, because we have the same haircut.
We do.
And I keep forgetting that.
And we also learn in this scene that Merida is still, if not more so, a free spirit. She's turned into a full teenager. She's 16 in this film. So her pastime, her passion is her horse, her running free, her bow and arrowing. But also we learn that her and her brothers are not in the typical Pixar Disney sibling rivalry.
Yeah.
Which was kind of new for both Disney and Pixar at this time. Siblings, while never shown as like full battling, unless that was the plot of the film, were typically shown in the more 90s light of sibling era, where everyone picked on each other and that was normal and fine. Pixar went ahead and showed her and her much younger siblings as, while maybe not being best friends, they help each other. She brings them donuts.
They're in cahoots. You know, I didn't know that. Again, granted, I haven't watched as much Disney as you have either.
It's a trope that, like, nowadays a lot of people are like, you're the reason me and my siblings fighted so much, was because we thought this was normal. We could have been friends, damn it.
Huh.
And granted, siblings fight. That's normal. But, like, it was a hardcore trope for quite a long time.
Interesting. Oh, I can see it now with, like, even Stevens.
Yeah. The TV shows leaned into it a lot harder because we had more time to explore the siblings.
Okay.
But the movies, of course, followed suit. Merida and her brothers, they seem to be in cut of the same thread.
Even if you're not related, if you're both orphans, Naruto and Sasuke.
Yeah, very much so. But we also now get to see more of Eleanor's character development in the last 10 years.
Yes.
She's got some gray hairs, and I'm imagining the boys and Merida put all of those on her head.
Yes. Before we get into that real quick, because we're starting to go through the castle, one thing I really appreciate that the crew realized early on, because, again, my background, I grew up around castles and old shit.
And I grew up around none of that.
The crew didn't realize, like, how ungrand castles really are.
They're so boring. I love a castle that's just a room.
I mean, they're interesting, but, like, they're not...
I appreciate that they purposefully picked a more interesting castle than they could have. Because a lot of castles were literally one room in a tower. Or a box on a hill. They at least picked one that had a couple rooms.
Yeah.
I like that touch. Very nice. But I also appreciate that it's not grand. There's no fancy paintings anywhere. There's a table in the room. And also, it does help move us from royalty families, which we are used to with Disney princesses, and move us to families.
We're very much, and as I've learned through you recently, we're much more accustomed to the Victorian
are we not?
Thought of castles.
Which was... like, elegant as shit.
Yeah, because their thought of, like, oh, the toilet just drains out into the cliff?
Yeah, your poop just falls out the bottom.
Yeah, like, people were like, they were amazed by that. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, where else was it gonna go?
Yeah.
But also, like, I love that Victorians fooled us all into thinking they were clean. Dirty Victorians.
Anywho, enough of our little side history tangent.
Yes.
We do learn how Merida is doing now.
Yeah.
And she, by her standards, is doing horribly.
Ugh.
Woe is me, as her mother, Eleanor, has structured her life into training her to be a prim and proper princess, wanting her to be perfect.
And I will say, this is the hard line of the movie, where as a younger person, when I first watched this, I related so hard to Merida. And I was like, oh my god, how can her mom possibly do this to her? This is rough. I mean, it's not the worst we've seen. She's not being abused like Cinderella. But like, oh, this sucks. And now as an adult, I'm like, girl, you just a teenager. Calm down.
Girl. You were an adult when this movie came out.
I was an adult. But
you were in your early 20s.
Yes. But I would argue that early 20s nowadays is about what a 16-year-old was back then.
Okay.
By 16, you are fully expected to be ready to take over because your dad could keel over at any fucking second. If the man gets a toothache, he's dead.
Yeah.
She's next in line. She's the eldest by a lot. Her brothers are 6.
Yeah.
If that. We're not really sure how old the triplets are. But they are, and I quote, wee babes.
Yeah. True.
Like, her responsibility is to take over if her mom and dad keel over, and the way the triplets are going, that could be any day.
True. So, real quick as well, Merida's voice actress, Kelly MacDonald,
yes,
actually used the idea of her mother in the room to get in the right mood for her lines.
Yes.
Which, I don't know mother-daughter relationships, as I have 2 siblings.
Yes.
But
both of her boys?
Yes, both of them boys, yeah. So I've never had to deal with that.
I will say, Brave was one of the few films still that shows a mother-daughter tension in even though it's a historical, old-timey queen and princess tension, it's still so believable.
Yeah. Your
parents often will, like, especially as a teenage girl, especially in that mindset of, like, I'm an adult, I can do what I want, you're not an adult, calm down, it is so hard for both parties to hear. Because as the parent, you're like, come on, just do what I ask and your life will be so much easier. This is for you. I promise you need this in like 2 years. And as a teenager, you're like, I know it already. Stop.
Yeah, I know you
I already know how the kingdom was formed, Mom.
Well, and also we're establishing that Merida is not our clean Disney princess.
No.
And we're also establishing that her rebellion seems more justified than other Disney movies. And by justified, I mean as an act of teenage rebellion, not trying to escape slave labor or killings.
Yes, I will say that was one of the only parts from the director's commentary that kind of ground my gears a little bit, was they spend a lot of time, and that part of this was the promotion of this film was promoted very heavily as a feminist film.
Yeah.
That's debatable to some extent, because this is a standard daughter-mother film, as opposed to a statement on femininity.
And that's the thing, too. It's not like necessarily... I see where they're coming with feminism because it is a strong female lead.
It is, which was, for Pixar, new and interesting. Yeah. For Disney, old hat.
A bit, yeah.
I mean, she's like 13 in the princess lineup, and those are just the official ones. There's like 26 other non-official ones who came before her.
Yeah, okay.
But this movie was portrayed for a lot of people as like, oh, she's finally the quote-unquote strong female lead. And yes and no, that depends on how you define strength.
Yeah, and I mean, that's any movie.
It is. But it was one of those weird things where, like, you could tell that the directors had watched Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty in a different light than, like, a lot of girls had watched it.
Yeah.
Because we watched it and we saw someone relatable and someone who was upbeat and peppy despite their problems. Mm-hmm. And they like, the directors were like, she's the only princess who mucks out stalls. I was like, you don't remember the first half of Cinderella like I do. That girl was cleaning toilets.
There is a difference, and I'll explain it in a little. That I have thoughts on that later.
But I do like. I'm saying this, but I do like Merida.
Yeah,
she's one of my favorites, and part of that is because she takes responsibility for the things that she loves. She takes pride in her horse and feeding it and cleaning it herself. She could have a person do that for her if she wanted. But yeah. She doesn't. She does it herself. This is her pet. It's not just a horse.
Yeah. And we'll get to that in a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So we learned that Merida's only breath of freedom is from her mother's from her mother's oppression, is her free days, where she can ride her horse and practice her bowmanship and just explore the Scottish countryside.
And almost fall to her death while free climbing.
Yes, and this is done through a classic montage.
It is, but with some beautiful music.
Yes. And so, while she's exploring the wild and being herself, we also see her in a way as she more takes after her father.
Yes, she does.
But we've also, through this, we've learned that she's grown in different ways than what her mother wants. She is an expert archer. She is.
She's an expert archer, and as far as her mom can see, she's not taken any of her lessons to heart.
Oh, yeah. And this is also, for me, the first part where I started thinking of why Brave for me, or why Brave didn't, from my understanding, hit that cultural spot that most of Disney's princess movies have.
Yeah.
And this part is normally where we'd have Merida sing a song like the Bonjour song from Beauty and the Beast.
There's a term for that song.
Okay.
It's the I Want song. And it is a classic Disney trope because most of these films are directed to young kids.
And I brought that up in another episode that I can't remember which one I brought it up into.
Yeah. Merida is one of, I think, only two official... I think she might be the only one now that... Because they changed the lineup a little bit on me since they removed Tinkerbell. And added Moana, but maybe Raya, the brand new princess. I'm not sure if she's in the lineup yet. We'll see. And I haven't seen that movie.
Moana is in the princess.
She is.
She's the most recent one since Merida.
She is.
Merida is number 11.
Yes. There is some debate on whether or not the brand new Dragon movie, if she will be counted as one of the top 12. A.k.a. to the 13th. We'll see. But it is a classic Disney trope to have the I Want song. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because when Disney writes movies, Disney wants their audience to be specifically young girls between the ages of, like, toddler to teen.
Yeah.
Specifically young teen. And it is easiest to portray emotions when you have the characters sing about them. A, because children pick up singing the best.
Yeah.
And B, because having a character boldly state what it is that they want or what their heart's desire is helps children fully understand their character quickly and easily.
Yeah.
It's a good tool. There's nothing wrong with it. But Pixar's not Disney.
No. Well, and on top of that, I feel if she was a singing princess, this would not fit in with her rebellion.
No.
Because singing feels like it would be something she was taught and practiced.
Yeah.
Because at one point she is playing the harp.
Yes.
Or lyra. She's playing some musical instrument.
I think it's the lyra, but whatever. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would have been weird for her character, even if they had tried to do it in some way that was, like, non-traditional-ish for her, or done it in a way that felt like more of, like, her speaking her thoughts. It would have been weird and gone against her character a little bit. And B, while Pixar makes children's movies, Pixar excels at making movies that, while on paper, are for that Disney target audience range, in reality hit for the higher age range, teenagers to young adults.
Yeah.
And at this time period, teenagers and young adults were tired of Disney songs. It's come back around, especially since Frozen 2. People have really gotten back into the whole Disney belting marathon. But there was a point, especially when we were having a lull in really good Disney songs, that it was unnecessary.
And I am in the other camp where my favorite part, or one of my favorite scenes in a movie, is in Shaolin Soccer. When they start doing the musical number, and then the shop owner just comes in like, "What the hell are you doing? Go back to work. You're adults."
Yes, I understand that. One of these days, you, me, and Brian are going to sit down and we're going to go over Brian and I's top favorite songs. All of them are villain songs. Because villain songs slap and musically are by far the most interesting.
Okay.
We'll get there and I'll explain it. Sounds
good. Other side note during this montage, Merida carves a Celtic eagle on her bow.
She does. It's very pretty.
Yes. I couldn't find any symbolism. I just thought it was an interesting fact because since Midsummer, anytime there's a symbol, I want to know what it means.
Honestly, so all of the princesses have symbols. It's part of Disney's requirement. It's part of their branding deal. So they were hoping that Merida's eagle would be part of her symbol. That's why it's seen so heavily in the first part of the movie. Yeah. It's why it's seen it's part of her carving it on. They were kind of hoping that was what was going to stick, but they cut the eagle out later on in the film.
Okay.
Which was fine and ended up working out and she didn't suffer from it, but that's part of why you see them heavily push weird symbolism that doesn't mean shit. Okay. It's because later on they need a marketing.
And, I get it. I mean, that's at the end of the day, a movie's a business.
It is. And when you're working with kids' movies, your business isn't the movie. It's all the other shit.
Yeah.
So.
Hence Baby Yoda.
He's the only reason any child saw that show. If he wasn't in it, kids wouldn't have seen it. No kid is that into The Mandalorian. Star Wars, yes. Mandalorian, meh.
I haven't seen the show. I just know Baby Yoda.
I understand.
Yeah. Anywho, so one thing I've noticed as well is I always find how interesting it is going in doing deep dives into these animated films. How much work actually goes into this?
Oh my gosh,
because
it's crazy.
Not only did I mention that they went to Scotland, the animators took archery lessons to figure out how Merida would shoot her bow.
And they didn't just take archery lessons. They deep dived into archery, which we'll see later on with some slow-mo imagery of her shooting the arrow. Yep. And how they bothered to get a weird phenomenon that occasionally happens with archery.
Yeah. And on top of that, the richness of the environment is partially because it was generated mathematically.
Yes.
To add moss, to add texture, just to do all kinds of these weird little calculations. It's like finding out there was this picture going around of this super complicated formula, and people are like, you think this is some life-altering mathematical theorem. This is the math theorem that makes the Pokeball wiggle wiggle.
I love it.
Yes.
The other thing that they did, which was really smart, was while they did go to Scotland and they got a ton of inspiration for it, they applied the laws of Scottish landscape to places that they were more familiar with. Mm-hmm. So the Firefalls falling, that's from a different national park and is a real phenomenon.
Yeah. And that's in the United States.
But they applied the laws, the rockwork, the way that the clouds and the magic sat on Scotland, and they applied it to things they were a little bit more familiar with that they'd probably studied a little longer.
Mm-hmm. As well, we almost had a different movie.
We did.
Because when Chapman was a director, which we'll get into a little later on.
For sure.
About 80% of the film took place in snow.
Yes, which I understand, because part of the snow was tied to the change in magic.
Okay.
It was supposed to start in the Witch's Hutch, which we'll get to in a second, and be a definite defining moment for not just Merida and her mom's relationship, but how this magic's affecting the whole world.
Okay.
But the animators didn't like how it looked and how it hid a lot of the really beautiful landscape, and so they removed most of the snow. We still get a tiny bit of snow in one of the scenes of the trailer.
And we get it in the beginning as they're swooping through the landscape.
Exactly. Yeah. So we still got some of the pretty snow, but honestly, I'm kind of glad the snow didn't stay. The scenery is too beautiful.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. It wouldn't have captured... Thematically, it would have been fine, but it wouldn't have captured the richness and magic of Scotland.
The other thing that would have made it it would have weakened it if they kept the snow is the movie Brother Bear, even though at the time wasn't a competition for this movie, later on kind of is, because it's also kind of a quote-unquote unfound favorite Disney movie. Even though Merida, by number standards alone, is a big Disney movie, she's arguably not one of the top 3 Disney princesses. Mm-hmm. And so Brother Bear takes place in what we can assume is Upper Canada, Alaska region.
Yeah, Oregon, Washington, Pacific Northwest.
Pacific Northwest, or even maybe even higher, since we've got the lights happening.
I mean, I lived just north of Anchorage, and we had northern lights every now and then.
They made it vague, which is nice, because it leaves it open for a lot.
Yeah.
You could pin it down if you really tried, I think, but, like, that's part of the fun of these movies, is that it's supposed to be kind of, meh?
Okay.
But that movie takes place predominantly, it has seasons. It shows a full year, I think. Yeah. And a lot of people's memory of it is the snow scenes with the bears. And even though they're brown bears, bear snow plus bear snow equals weird movie confusion. So this did actually help their case a lot. Okay. This did separate them.
All right. And so now Merida returns to the castle as she snatches some sweets from the kitchen and joins her family at the table where Fergus is recounting his now, and I love this too because it's the now tired and
beat family.
Everyone tired of hearing his fight with Mor'du.
To the point where one of his sons is reenacting it as he's telling it in time to him saying it.
Yep, as Merida comes in and ruins it as he says, "Oh, but that's the best part."
And they explain that at this point we know for sure that while he in his mind has defeated the bear, he lost a leg in the process, thus getting a really cool pirate leg.
Yes. And Mom is snarky about the bow on the table and her thoughts about Merida even owning one.
Yeah, she's gotten a little older and grumpier.
Yeah.
But we also get to see that everyone else has a giant plate full of food.
Yeah.
And she's got bills.
Yeah. Well, and that was the directors wanting to flip the standard mother-father stereotypes.
It's very clear that in this point in age, in Eleanor's mind, the queen actually runs the castle, and her dear husband, while a wonderful fellow, spends most of his time hunting bears and telling drunk stories.
Yeah, she is reading the 11th century equivalent of a newspaper.
She is. Yeah, she is.
And so, at the dinner table, Merida recounts her tale of how she went to the Crone's Tooth, and she drank from the fire falls.
And how she and her dad feel like that's so cool, and her mom recognizes how very dangerous that action was.
Yes.
A very teenage thing to do.
Well, and on top of that, I'm glad you brought up how the mom acts, because this is very much a precursor of, and maybe not intentional either, of just the brink of chaos that everything is on. Because not only is Merida... and this is spoiling a little bit later, but whatever. Not only is Merida the one who has 3 suitors, she has 3 brothers.
She does. She lives in a boy's world.
And Eleanor is the one keeping things just barely in order while letting a little chaos out.
And as far as we can tell, Merida, other than Eleanor, Merida doesn't have any, like, female role models to look up to. It's just her mom, and as a teenager, you're gonna hate your parents. That's how being a teenager works. That's part of growing up. No. And so, like, this whole scene sets up Merida and her mom for you to realize that there's always been tension. Both of them don't see each other eye to eye on a lot of different things, and they just can't communicate this.
Yeah. And in this part, we also learn that Fergus is in on keeping Merida out of the dark, that they've been hiding her potential matrimony to one of the 3 other clans.
And I also love this scene because the eye contact that the mom and dad make is I thought you were going to talk to her about this eye contact.
Or no, it wasn't I thought you were. It was, honey, you were supposed to tell her this.
You were supposed to tell her this a month ago.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh shit, I forgot.
It's not even I forgot, it's just like, I didn't want to deal with this.
I didn't want to do it. So, surprise, honey, you're getting married next week.
Yes, and so Merida, pissed off, heads to her room, which Eleanor follows. And I love this because instead of, like, yelling or screaming or turning her radio loud like we would see in a modern film, she is attacking her worn-out bedpost with her sword.
Yes, she is. I love it. It's very, like, they managed to capture a teenager without making them stupid, angsty, like in, like, The Breakfast Club, where, yeah, they're realistic teens, but, like, come on. This is pretty angsty for a teen. She is upset. She has a lot of emotions. She wants to be taken seriously as an adult, but she's not. And
on top of that, she's acting out more, like, how we would typically expect a boy to act out.
Yeah, she's been raised as best as her dad can, but her dad raised 3 boys. Or 4 boys, not a princess.
Instead of punching a hole through the wall, she's attacking her bedpost with a sword.
Yes, she is.
Yes. And now her mom enters to give us a little exposition on the history of the 4 kingdoms and their family-specific role in trying to convey that this marriage is kind of important.
And also, this is where we learn that this marriage thing, while, yes, they should have told her, this is tradition. This is something that's been on the books since she was born.
Yeah.
This isn't surprise you're getting married. This is like, hey, by the way, you remember this is happening.
Yeah, you're supposed to get married around this time. She's just...
didn't want to.
She's just only told the day before it's what we're assume is the day before.
Still sucks, but also like we're now being told like, hey, this is how we keep our nation running.
Yeah.
This is why you've been going to class, girl.
Yep. And in the commentary during the scene, they also mentioned that they added flashes of the ancient kingdom, and it was to help the audience follow the story as well as establish elements later on in the movie.
Which I liked a lot because it worked.
Mm-hmm. This also is a reference, and I think this was on the IMDb page, to the reign of Clovis, who was the first king of the Franks to unite the first one to unite the Frankish tribes under one rule.
Oh, an interesting tidbit.
Because he divided his land into 4 sons.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because that never goes badly.
Never leads to any issues.
No, never. Not anywhere else in the world ever.
No, not cousins fighting cousins.
Oh,
but fancy cousins fighting cousins.
Fancy cousins fighting cousins.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, back in their separate areas, Eleanor is in her room and is venting to Fergus, while Merida is cleaning the stable and venting to her horse.
Yes.
This is where I wanted to bring up why she is a different princess, because as you mentioned in Cinderella is being oppressed and forced to clean. Merida wants to be there.
Yes, it is different.
It's a chore, but it's a chore that she's wanting. She's not necessarily wanting to do, but something she is okay with.
Yes, and this is where we see how old princesses and new princesses are different. Old princesses were teaching a more rounded, like, moral. So, like, patience, love, kindness were more of the center of those, mostly because they were based off of old fairy tales, and that's what those were trying to convey.
Yeah.
And newer fairy tales are trying to teach morals like, don't be afraid to be yourself, but also learn to listen to others.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to find your own way, but also try to understand what's going on.
Communicate so you don't turn your mom into a damn bear.
Yes, which, that's an important lesson. Both are important lessons. Both use cleaning to teach them, but in different ways. Merida has a pet, and this is how you take care of your pet.
Yes.
You pick up its poop, and you feed it oats. And Cinderella is being verbally abused and held hostage.
And sometimes you chase them around with a cardboard tube.
And sometimes you chase your cats around with a cardboard tube because they don't like it.
Hobbs needs the exercise, and that's the only way I can do it.
Unfortunately, she does need the exercise.
Yes.
She is very chubby.
And so, also in the commentary, I like that. I like learning the process of some of this.
Yes.
Because these were originally separate conversations.
Yes.
And they were completely different scenes, but they decided to splice them together to make it feel like they were having a conversation, but they weren't.
Yes. Which is also a really, like, I'm glad they picked this because we also now get to see, like, if they could just talk like they talk to their horse or their husband to each other and listen, we wouldn't have had the whole movie.
Yeah.
We would have been done with this. We would have found a way around it. Maybe we would have pushed the marriage back a couple years. I don't know. Some agreement would have been made. We wouldn't have turned into a bear.
And you can't have a movie without an asshole.
You can't have a movie without an asshole.
Yes.
That is it.
That is my philosophy.
No, I agree. And in this movie, both of them are assholes to each other. They just don't realize it.
Yep. And we also get a little bit more of Eleanor's character because there's not a lot of development for her because that's not who the movie's for.
She's also already an adult.
Yeah. We learned that she had the same issues as Merida back in the day, and that
yeah, because nobody wants to be forced to be married.
And she also wasn't the biggest fan of Fergus at first.
You don't frickin' say.
Big hairy man
who clearly has nothing in common with her from like on paper, but like I like this conversation because from her mindset, she's capable of understanding Merida's problems.
Yeah.
She wasn't a fan of getting married either, but, you know, it worked out and her and Fergus now get along great. But who knows how many years that took for them to get along great.
Yeah, well, it's also how quickly they forgot youth.
Oh, for sure. And that's part of growing up. And I would argue that this movie's not just about a teenager coming of age. It's about an adult relearning to be an adult.
And I just had a weird thought. If this was made into a live action...
It'd be a weird live action.
Henry Zabrowski or Ben Kissel as Fergus.
No.
You know both of them are perfect in their own ways.
If you could fuse them together, I might agree.
Yes.
But yes, her dad in this movie plays the role of the comedic relief, which works perfectly because he's such a dad character.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to relate to him solely as a dad. And so him pretending to be Merida so that her mom can vent, and I just want to be pretty and let my hair fly free in the breeze and shoot arrows off into the sunset. And,
well, Fergus, instead of playing out like the typical father, plays out more like the fun uncle.
He does play off as a fun uncle, but I also would argue that, like, this is another, like, Pixar moment in the story direction. Disney's very much a fan of either dead parents, because that's traumatic as shit, or
dead siblings in Big Hero 6.
Yeah, also traumatic as shit. No, his parents are dead too. He's living with his aunt. Everyone he loves is dead minus his aunt and his cat. And it's not even his cat, it's his aunt's cat. But Disney either pulls parents out completely, or the parent isn't part of the growth story. Yeah. It is something that the character, who's usually portrayed as more adult-ish than they actually are, does by themselves, or the parent doesn't really grow alongside their child. I'm thinking Little Mermaid here.
Okay.
Whereas this is one of the few ones where, while her dad doesn't have a growth arc, other than just realizing that he loves his wife and doesn't want her to be a bear,
he's just a side character.
He's just a side character, which works out really nicely because that leaves us the open-ended interpretation of, like, what a father figure should be.
Yeah.
He could be as involved in Merida's life as you want him to be, because he's not, and that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, now we are taken to the lake outside of the castle.
Yes.
As the other clans arrive.
And they start having a row battle, because that's what siblings do.
Yes, they're competing against each other.
This feels like a giant family reunion, which makes it weird that they're getting married, but also hilarious.
Yes, and at the same time, Merida is being stuffed into princess attire.
Yes, which, I will say, this is one of the few parts of the scene where my, like, dress historian bits were like, oh, she looks so pretty, and they bothered to put a hat on her. Which, granted, it's not called a hat. It's got its own name. The whole dress is beautiful.
Is it a bonnet?
No, bonnets have little frills and think prairie. Little House on the Prairie wears bonnets. I think it's a habit, but I could be wrong. I'm not super into this time period.
I've never seen Little House on the Prairie either, so... Shush.
You'd hate it. You'd hate the absolute shit out of it. It's so fucking wholesome. But this is something that, as a dress historian, they kind of show a little tiny bit, because we do see that Merida's mother has been sewing her in this dress into a tapestry that she's been working on since Merida was born, which is fairly historically accurate. because you didn't get a lot of clothes in this day and age.
No, you had like 2.
You had to. Their royalty, they might have 4. Get excited, guys. And for the most part, while the clothing is time period, not super great, and detail-wise, maybe not super great, Merida's clothes are pretty good. And this dress, while maybe a tiny bit too small on her, this is something that, like, her mom would have been working on this dress for a very long time. This would not be the first time Merida has put this thing on.
Yeah.
So, like, this is the only part, this and the archery scene in this dress, I can't stand, because this would not be how this works. These dresses were hand-sewn, so there is no, like, oh, it doesn't fit me. No, this would have fit you like a glove.
Oh, yeah.
And also, like, yeah, it's a little awkward and stiff. Maybe because of the material they're trying to do that, but no. Yes, this ball gown would have been not nearly as comfortable as her normal clothes with the open elbows and the open shoulders, but this gown would not have made her walk like the child in the poofy suit from the Christmas Story.
Yeah.
She would have been fine.
But it's important thematically that it's stuffy and...
It is. I also like the rebellion of, like, making her hair go away, which historically accurate, but, like, hilarious.
Yeah, and also Merida's teenage rebellion of, that's the thing she has control of.
Which is hilarious, because it's the one thing she has no control over is that frickin' hair. And
also, I just realized something, and the reason I was Googling the triplets.
Yes.
I realized probably my favorite part of this movie is no one wears pants.
No one wears pants.
There are no pants in this movie. It is a pants-free movie. But
honestly, like, a lot of people have made pants into this big deal. Pants really weren't a thing back in ye olde times, because how were you gonna close them? You had to lace yourself into pants. So heaven forbid you have to poop halfway through the day. You have to unlace yourself.
Yeah.
That sounds like a pain.
Kilts are more convenient.
Kilts were more convenient. It was the traditional thing to wear, and, like, this is a fancy dress party. Yeah, everyone's gonna wear their best, most washed kilt.
They've also done studies that kilts are good for virility. They keep a nice ambient temperature.
They say that. I think it's an excuse to wear a kilt. But you know what? Whatever your excuse is, you run with it.
Do it. And so, also in this scene is, we've just had that argument.
Yeah.
Or kind of conversation. And there was a chance for them to connect. But...
They could have. But they don't.
Eleanor doesn't follow through. And
they both don't.
They don't.
No. But, and also, like, this is part of the lesson of the story. Mm-hmm. Like, everyone else learns fun, like, general life lessons. This movie's about learning to communicate. Yeah. And this is part of the struggle, is learning how to say, like, I feel weird about this. Do you feel weird about this?
Yeah, and being an adult dealing with children, because that's where Eleanor's...
It's hard, especially because where's that line? She's, at this point in history, she's today turning into an adult.
And we don't really even have, like, the standard hidden dick jokes.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brave is an odd Disney movie.
It is. It hits on a weird topic, but it's an important one.
Yeah. And so, as everyone's getting into place, the lords arrive in a rather brutish fashion. As we are introduced to the suitors.
I freaking love this scene.
I do
it's
too.
It's so funny. They almost didn't have suitors. On the original cutting floor, they were just going to introduce the clans and the lords and not show the sons and just call it a day.
Well, originally, the lords were the suitors.
Yes, which was
historically accurate.
Which, correct, if, they weren't already married, also maybe anyway. But, yeah, I'm glad we got to see their sons, because, like, it is a Disney Pixar film. And while I understand people's desire to have this be a more serious one, the topic is meant to be a little bit more serious.
Yeah.
The humor is necessary for young people to watch.
Oh, I mean, this is, even for an adult, it's solid.
And the humor in this one hits perfectly.
Yeah, because first we learn of, because this is where I'm glad I learned the history a little bit.
Yes.
We're first introduced to Macintosh, who is named after Steve Jobs because he died shortly before production of this movie, and
he was a co-founder of Pixar. You have to respect the boss.
Blah blah blah. My thoughts of Apple aside, it's a reference.
Ignore the Apple part of him. He co-founded Pixar. Yes, you have to say.
Who fought the Northern invaders, killed 100 of them single-handedly, and is a cocky motherfucker.
He is. Bless him.
Yes. And second, we are introduced to MacGuffin.
I love the MacGuffin clan.
Who fought the Vikings and is also a giant, and they keep embellishing how many they've fought.
Yeah, like every time they go back to how many they've killed, they've added a couple 10.
Yeah. Side note, MacGuffin is the lines we don't understand. He's actually speaking the Doric language, that is a spoken language of Northeast Scotland. The voice actor, Kevin McKidd, yes. Who was the voice actor for him, actually, his mother speaks Doric. And so before recording, he would send the lines up to her and she'd translate them.
Yeah, and when he needed a thicker one for, like, a smaller line, he'd ask his grandparents.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love, because I'm also from a family whose grandparents, some of them speak a little thicker accented than others.
Yeah, which when I was over at your guys' house for Christmas,
some people don't realize how strongly the Hick accent ties back to Irish accent.
Well, okay, I've had talks with my mom on this, of, like, how the English act like their language is, or their accent is so prim and proper, when actually it's a bastardization of...
Because they wanted to be special.
Yeah, of English, and how it's gotten just progressively worse, and, like,
but
their accents are like the European equivalent of our backwoods people accents.
Yes. But I also like this because as Americans, we are very familiar with the concept of one nation, different accents. It depends on where you're from. And we forget that quite quickly for Scotland.
Yeah,
because most Americans aren't familiar with a different Scottish accent than the one the person who's currently speaking has.
And I forget I forget our different upbringings because I grew up with that Northern German's High German, and the German I learned was the German of the common people.
Yeah, and I would even make the argument that a lot of Americans for English accents can kind of only think of two. The Beatles and James Bond. That's kind of our reference point. And so I like that they put in as many accents as they could.
The one that's most famous is Dick Van Dyke.
Oh, for sure.
Which is the worst one, apparently.
It is. But also, like, Dick Van Dyke was such a cultural icon. How can you not love the man? So...
Well, and I think we do see a little bit of that in other media, specifically anime, where they always bring up that someone talks like a hick from a different part of the country.
At this point, it's like a trope to speak in hick Osakan, But Americans, we forget that quickly because we just accept that whoever is speaking to us, like, that's the accent. That must be the correct one. You're from there. You should know.
Yeah.
And we forget that, like, just like here, you've got a southern, a northern, an eastern, a western, a central, a hills accent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, this character is by far my favorite. I find him very funny.
I like him.
He feels like a family member.
He reminds me of a very close friend of ours, specifically character-wise as he is big and at first seems brutish, but is very delicate.
He's very delicate.
Yeah.
He's very aware of his own strength.
Yes, as most tall, bulky people I know are.
Yeah.
And finally, we meet the final suitor, Dingwall.
My favorite clan. This would be the one my family hails from, I'm sure.
Because they feel the most inbred, right?
No. Because the main lord comes out and he has hair coming out of every piece of his body but his eyeballs. This man has armpit hair. This man has elbow pit hair. He has ear hair that you can see from 10 feet away. And he's standing next to Conan the Barbarian. Which
I also want to point out, I love how we're introduced to Father Dingwall.
Yes.
Because he's the...
He's the shit maker.
I've got it for my live action casting.
Yes.
Ben Kissel is Fergus.
Yes.
Henry Zabrowski is Dingwall.
That's what I figured.
Short, round...
Very hairy.
Has to stand on a stool to feel like he's tall like everyone else.
and of course, to, bluff his way in a little bit, he shows off the one dude in their clan who's very tall, very muscular, and very handsome, and looks like he could kill an eagle by sniffing too hard.
He looks like the Scottish Schwarzenegger.
The animators called this character... I don't think this character actually has a, given name, but the animators kept referring to him as Conan.
Yeah.
And that's what he looks like, is a very tan Conan the Barbarian. And
yes.
Conan's already very tan. And so, of course, behind him is his actual son, who looks an awful lot like him, just less fat.
And a lot less going on.
The poor boy... Okay, and remember, Merida's supposed to be 16. these are all supposed to be roughly 16-year-old boys as well.
Yeah.
They look it.
Yeah.
Like, you're not a full-fleshed human at 16. You've still got some growing. Like, for all we know, this poor guy will, like, grow into his nose and teeth. But at the moment, he has not.
You have the quarterback, the linebacker, and the water boy.
We do. But again, from a 16-year-old high school one, not cute college boys.
Yes. And we also... Merida has some interest.
She does.
Because she is interested in Conan.
Yeah, because everyone in this film is interested in Conan. Because
also the way Father Dingwall is talking about him is that he single-handedly fought off an entire armada.
Yes, which we learn very much later in the film. We do get to see some of the boys' personalities come through a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it is implied that their fathers have beefed all three of them up to be what they are not.
Yeah.
And that they all still have a lot of growing up to do themselves. And so there is an implied hint that maybe this poor, big-nosed, very slow-appearing child might be good at other things.
Yeah.
He's just not the boy his dad said he is.
Yeah, they're peacocking.
They are peacocking hard.
Yeah.
And they're doing so with beautiful Conan the Barbarian.
Yes. And so we learned that also this entire group is very much a boys' club.
It's such a boy. There's not a woman in the room minus Eleanor and
Merida.
Merida, yeah. They are the only two girls in the room.
Yeah, and it's teetering on chaos because as they begin to insult each other...
It goes too far.
It goes into a fight, and on top of that, the triplets are the ones who keep antagonizing it.
Yeah, they keep stabbing people in the butt.
And even Fergus trying to intervene doesn't do shit.
No, because as we learn very quickly, Fergus doesn't hold any power.
No.
Eleanor does.
Yeah, because she comes in and drags them all by the ears out of the fight and calms everyone down.
And at this point, I think this is the part where Eleanor was hoping that Merida would see, like, this is why I've been teaching you to public speak. This is why I've been teaching you to hold yourself this way. Because you are not a boy. You can't outpower these guys. Your dad can't even outpower these guys, and he takes down bears.
And in a way, she's also trying to promote Merida as being better than them because as Fergus does try and give his speech... He can't do it in Merida, or not Merida, Eleanor kind of...
Finishes his speech for him because he's a terrible public speaker.
Yes, and we also learn the purpose of the games, that they're there for... only the firstborns can compete for the hand of the Princess of Dunbrook, and that the princess is the one who chooses the games, and we're also kind of given... It's also giving Merida a way out.
It is. And in true teenage girl fashion, she feels like she's found a loophole. Because she, unlike what she thinks, anyone before her, because as a teenager you think you're the first rebellious teen on this planet, she thinks she's probably the only girl. She's going to pick archery.
Yeah. And
she is good at archery. And she's the firstborn.
Exactly. There's a plot of stewing in her head.
There is a plot of stewing in her head. And at this point, we're introduced to what appear to be Highland games.
Yes, where the triplets are stealing sweets, doing their triplet thing.
Also, like, I feel for Eleanor every time the triplets come on the screen. These boys have a governess, they have a mother, they have a father, they have an older sister, and they still run havoc on this world.
Oh, yeah.
These boys are unstoppable tornadoes.
They are chaos.
They are, and I love them.
And so, little history things on this one.
Yeah.
The horns are called Carnyx horns.
They're dope.
And they are normally boar heads.
Because boars are scary.
But they were changed to bears in this movie.
Because this is a bear movie.
Add to the motif.
Yeah.
Also, I love how the children are beating an effigy of a bear.
Yes, they are.
Just teaching the hatred towards bears in this movie.
But, like, this is fairly, like, realistic. And granted, I'm not Scottish history expert, but, like, think about all of our bad guys from, like, our Germanic and English folktales. It's always a wolf, and that's why there's almost no wolves left. It's because we hated them to the point of extinction.
Or dragons, goblins.
I would argue that both of those are fake and wolves are real. But yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But, like, we've done this to things that we have seen as threats or we've been feared of. And, like, granted, back in those days, as we've seen, bears are a real thing to be scared of.
Oh,
You should teach your children to be fearful and maybe attack a bear. But also, like, this is... I like this little detail, because not only are they keeping the bear theme, but, like, this is probably something that really happened. We have weird sheep children races now. Why not?
What are sheep children races?
You didn't go to the rodeo with us last year. Okay, so in the Midwest, we have rodeos, right?
Yes, I know what rodeos are.
Okay, so there's the adult part of the rodeo where we put a full-grown man on a bull that could kill him and, like, see how long he can stay on, right?
Okay.
And there's different versions, and there's different points.
Is this just children?
You put a 5-year-old, you stick it on a sheep, and you slap the sheep. It's great! Most of them, like, slowly slide off the sheep.
Fascinating.
It's great.
Fascinating.
This is probably why most of our children are brain damaged. But it's one of my favorite activities. It's part of the reason I go to the fair, is to watch the sheep races.
I learned so much about the Midwest from everyone.
We'll have to give you a cultural lesson by going to the rodeo next year.
I'm down. And so, other little side history about the Highland Games. The origins of the games actually predate recorded history.
Oh yeah, because of course we're going to throw shit around.
Because the directors mentioned that it was to practice war games, but...
Yeah, but like...
Their history is a little bit wrong from my understanding, because the earliest recorded history of the Highland Games in Scotland were between 1031 and 1093, so accurate to the times.
Yeah, they were good.
When King Malcolm II had a bunch of men race up Craig Chronic, and I probably butchered that, to determine who would be his royal messenger.
I mean, you gotta pick the best guy.
And our modern idea of the Highland Games come from the Victorian era.
You don't fucking say.
And yeah, the
Victorians butchered everyone's history, and we have a lot to be upset and thankful for them.
Yeah, which they invented they developed after the Highland Clearance, which was the eviction of many Scottish tenants from the Scottish Highlands and Islands between 1750 and 1860. Yeah.
But I appreciate that they did do at least some research into the Highland Games, because this is essentially what they are.
It's still fun to watch.
Oh, hell yeah.
I love watching Highland Games, because it feels like a medieval Olympics.
I love it.
Yes.
Yeah,
and so now it is time for the sons to show their strength.
In archery. And
all the while, Merida and Fergus are cracking jokes at them.
Which I think goes to prove that Merida and her dad have really created a bond as she's grown up. Yeah. Whereas her and her mother have, for different reasons, not had the same opportunity.
Yeah.
Mostly her brothers, I think. Well, and also, like, it's hard to bond with your mom who doesn't have the bow and interest arrow as you.
Yeah, and also, Eleanor has her life so constructed.
She does. And I think this is the part of the movie also where we can see where Eleanor's sense of humor isn't the same as Fergus's. No. And her daughter inherited Fergus's sense of humor.
And it's very much a teenage boy humor.
Oh, is it not? Because they spend most of this being like, wow, what a wimpy baby.
Yeah. And because...
My mother's left foot can do better than that child.
Yeah, and it starts off because MacGuffin, even though big and giant, he
holds the bow like a toothpick, yeah.
To be fair, it is kind of a toothpick to him.
Yeah, get the man a proper sized bow and maybe he'd do better. But he does pretty good.
Yeah, he does.
He does alright. He hits the target.
Yeah.
He does okay. And then we get to the next one who has a...
Macintosh.
And the Macintosh boy is...
He's showboating.
He's showboating hard, but arguably... And like, as a girl, growing up, I distinctly remember being like, oh my god, this one teenage boy is so cute. That's the cutest teenage boy in the school. And while I was never like an obsessed groupie, which he of course has in the background because he's the cute boy, as an adult watching this, you're like, wow, what a weird child.
Oh,
and like growing back and looking at your school yearbook, you're like, wow, the hot boy was sure a weird child.
I know exactly what kind of boy you're talking about, because in high school, the guy I'm thinking of actually had one of the 2 fights we ever had in my high school one of them was over him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is that boy.
Yeah.
And of course he's got his fan of groupies, and he hits the target, but it's not a bullseye, and in true teenage boy who thinks a lot of himself and puts a lot of pressure on himself, throws a giant baby hissy fit.
I mean...
He throws his bow on the ground and is like, I'm useless! Blah!
I think every teenage boy puts pressure on themselves.
And then we get to our last one.
Dingwall.
Dingwall, who, bless him, this isn't his activity.
And honestly, if Fergus hadn't interrupted him, he might not have done well at all.
No, he might have not even been in the running. But, Robin Hood style, we're trying to interrupt him, and he does great.
I was wrong. This is the dick joke of the movie, because Father Dingwall proceeds to lift his skirt at the other men. Or his kilt, sorry. His kilt.
His kilt skirt.
His male skirt.
His man skirt, yes.
Yeah.
And of course, because this is a movie with loose historical interpretations, we are going with the historical time period where there are no undergarments under this kilt.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. The true men.
The true men with their butt cheeks wide open.
And so, now, by the way, I learned there is an actual species of starfish called a chocolate starfish.
Of course there is. Have you not met any marine biologists? They have a terrible sense of humor.
No, I have not.
I had a friend who was one. I don't know. I hope she's still going strong.
I hope they move to a coast.
I think she moved to Hawaii, but I honestly don't remember.
I hope. And so, now a cloaked figure actually appears, and, to everyone but the viewer's surprise, it is Merida. As she begins to shoot arrows through starts hitting the targets on all of them.
She's not even stopping. She's just walking down the line.
Breaking the final one. She's breaking arrows, breaking hearts, and breaking traditions.
She is. And of course, in our one slow motion scene of the movie, the last one, which was a bullseye, she deep breaths, and in slow motion, splits his arrow in twain.
Yes. One thing I do like about this scene, too, it's the very stereotypical of her breaking out of her dress, her comfort zone to actually get her shots in. This dress plays a role a lot like the ripping of Grace's dress in Ready or Not.
It does. I will say, though, this is the other historical dress scene that pissed me off. It splits at the seams. This dress was hand-sewn. If this dress was going to split, it'd split anywhere but the seams. The seams would have been the strongest part.
Fascinating.
Those seams would have been hand-sewn. They would have been tiny-ass little stitches in pure silk thread, most likely. And they would have been back-stitched. Those seams would have been strong enough for a horse to run over.
I don't think they would have had silk at this time.
Maybe not. Her dress looks like it's silk just because of how they've edited it, but even if they hadn't, even if, let's say, it's a different thread, this is her wedding dress, remember?
Yeah.
Or her engagement dress. I'm not sure if she would have gotten a wedding dress.
It's her fancy dress that she wears when company's over.
Well, and it's implied that in the movie, this is implied that this is the only time she's worn this. So that's why I'm saying wedding dress. Is because this is her like coming of age dress.
We have two movies back to back that have elements of, or have parts where they have fitting dresses.
This is true. It's a common trope.
Okay.
But yeah, that's kind of my only twerp is like other parts of the dress might have ripped, but the seam itself probably wouldn't have.
Okay.
That part would have been hella strong.
Fascinating.
But visually looks fucking cool.
No, it's really cool.
Looks super dope.
Yeah.
She hulks out of her dress. Hell yeah.
And so now Eleanor is beyond pissed as Merida has quite royally fucked everything up. And
also like in the whole like I'm gonna give you to the count of 3 sort of like trial too. Because her mom this entire time, every arrow, she's like, don't you do it. Yeah. Don't you do it. And by the third one, she did it. Oh, she fucking did it.
Oh yeah. And they go back up to Eleanor's room where they're having their spat.
They are having a full unheated discussion, and neither of them have taken time to calm the fuck down.
Nope, and in her anger, Merida cuts the tapestry between her and her mom. Very symbolic. And
at this point, we also get to see that this tapestry was animated in the most crazy manner possible. They physically built a 3D tapestry, threads and all.
Yep, and they spent time cutting tapestries to figure out how it worked. They actually had to develop, this was one of their other softwares they had to develop just to do this alone.
And goddamn, this tapestry cutting scene, it hits.
Oh yeah, because Eleanor reacts very reactional to it.
Yeah. And she throws her bow in the fire.
Which is also the same bow that her Merida's father gave her in the opening scene.
And so we see that both of them have destroyed each other's main symbol.
But the key difference is that Eleanor responds like an adult
and immediately
realizes she done fucked up.
And I think that's the part where I like Brave as an adult mother-daughter film, because a lot of films try to show the whole like adult parent thing.
Yeah.
And even if the parent isn't the best parent or the correct parent, Eleanor immediately like she has her fit of anger, she does back as done to her, and then immediately goes, oh shit, no, that's not right. And then we get to see what the difference is. Merida does not immediately go, oh shit, I've ruined a piece of artwork my mother has spent a decade making.
Yeah.
That is the symbol of our family and has been hanging in her room for probably not even all that long, to be honest with you, because the boys are in it. So
at least 6 years.
Yeah, so at least 6 years at most. And this is a huge tapestry.
Yeah.
Like, those bad boys, and she arguably has been working on it alone with a little bit of Merida's help when she was younger.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
damn. Like, both of them fucked up royally.
Well, that's another interesting part to Brave, is that it's not traditional evil.
No,
like, it's
there is no traditional evil.
Yeah, it's not evil stepmother. It's not a horrible witch's curse.
Yeah, there's no, like, actual bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very ambiguous, human, it feels very human. Yes. I think that's the best way I just say it.
Yes.
But at this point, Merida flees into the wood with her horse, who, by the way, the horse's name is Angus. And
also, if you're interested and you love Angus as much as I do, there is a real-life version of Angus. He is a Clydesdale. He looks exactly like this. He is one of the favorite horses at Disney World.
Yeah, and I actually went into a little bit of research on Clydesdale, but that's not relevant to...
By the way, I love that they picked a Clydesdale, because he is from the correct region.
Yeah.
Like, they would have had Clydesdales. But also, they spend most of the time showing Angus full on, like, running as fast as he can.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious because Clydesdales are pulling horses. And so this is the equivalent of a bodybuilder who suddenly took up marathon running.
Yeah, and I if I remember right, this is another one they took a liberty with, because I don't think they showed up until later in history. But still, it's something we don't notice unless you're nerds like us. And
also, like, he's a Clydesdale, he looks amazing.
Yeah.
And, like, it's also easier to animate really, like, cute horse features, which Angus, in his credit, is not a caricature. No. He looks like a horse, he acts like a horse. But, like, that's why we like Angus, is because he is an actual horse, as opposed to Tangled's horse.
Or the caribou from Frozen? I don't know his stupid name. Sven?
Sven's the human, I think Chris... Or maybe Sven's the reindeer. One of them's the reindeer, the other one's the human, and they're exactly the same person.
Right, yeah.
Kristoff and Sven. One of them's the reindeer, not sure which.
I think Sven's the reindeer.
I think Sven is also the reindeer.
Yeah.
It's been a little while since I saw Frozen.
And so they wind up in a magic stone circle.
I love it.
That Angus will not go in.
No, because Angus is a smart boy.
Or he just has that
animal
sense. Yeah, like when my cats look up at nothing.
I think it's just your cats, man.
They're pretty stupid. But so, one thing that's actually crucial about this stone circle is that the production staff viewed this as the center of the world.
Yes, this is the teleport that connects us all.
Yes, and it's an ancient magical location that does not even have a legend for it.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it works.
Yeah.
Because, standing stones, always magical, but also the thought of running into a circle of anything in the woods usually means fairy circle, at least in Western tradition.
And I did not do any research on fairy circles.
We'll get to a different movie that has a proper fairy circle later.
This circle was actually designed off of the Callanish stones that are from the late Neolithic era.
And they're super cool if you get to look up pictures of them.
Oh, yeah.
They're so dope.
They are located on the Outer Hebrides, which is a set of islands near the village of Callanish.
Aw, cute.
Which, I bring this up because there is actually... I added this because there is a tie to it later on, and I'll get into it. So, Merida then spies a wisp, and as we know, it leads to fate, and it leads her deeper into a forest, very similar to her being let out as a child.
Yes, which I love how she has learned little from the last time she ran into Wisps and ended up in the front of a bear.
Yeah. And she is eventually led to a cottage where she finds an old woman claiming to be a woodcarver with an obsession for bears.
An obsession for bears, with the exception of one Easter egg in the background. Did you catch it?
The pizza truck.
Okay, so the pizza truck's back there too. There is a carving of Sully from Monsters, Inc. in the background.
I did see that, and that was their hint for Monsters University.
It was. There's also a fun fan theory that this witch is Boo from the originals Monster Inc., and she has learned the teleportation abilities of doors.
Ooh.
Which I love. There's no proof for this. Pixar has not agreed to this. They're like, guys, we put Easter eggs in all of our fucking movies. Calm your titties. Yeah. But I like it.
Well, another thing that they have no explanation for, why everything turns to bears.
Okay, yeah, they don't have an explanation, but also, like, I appreciate that they were like, it's all bears, just accept it. Because, like, that's this whole movie. They've literally changed other parts of history for bears.
It's like the opening monologue for Rubber.
Yes.
No reason.
No reason, just
no
accept
fucking
it.
Reason.
But also, like, if she had been a general woodcarver and it all hadn't been bears, would she have been as weird?
No.
No. And she's supposed to be a weird witch. So, like...
Because they were trying to intentionally break tradition.
They are. But also, like, if you've got a theme going, keep going.
Yeah. And, what do we do with witches, Chris?
We burn them?
According to Disney, we give them precious heirlooms in exchange for suspicious pastries.
And then we get better.
Actually, technically, yes, we do get better.
But yes, I like this scene a lot, because this witch spends a lot of time trying to convince Merida that, she's a wood carver living in the woods by herself and hasn't sold a single fucking wood carving in, like, decades, and that's why her house is full. Yeah. And then, of course, because you never carve where you craft, she leaves, closes the door, reopens it, and now it's a proper witch's hut. Yep. I love it. This witch is gold.
And I think part of the reason we like the witch is because she's not a good or bad witch. She's
is.
Just neutral chaos.
We also kind of get the impression that she's only learned one spell. Because we learn that she's the same witch who turned Mordew into a bear.
Later on.
Yeah.
But it's hinted at early on because also, of all the bears.
Also, like, she's a fucking witch. How many witches are there in this movie?
But she stopped being a witch because of too many unsatisfied customers. So I wonder how many
people did she turn into bears?
Yeah, exactly.
I like to think quite a few.
Yeah.
But also, like, maybe just one. Maybe Mordew comes by every afternoon and is like, hey, fuck you.
Also of note, it is hinted that she is even older than the kingdom from the original story.
Yes. I think the other reason why we like her, too, as a witch, especially for those of us who are in the, like, Disney fan club, because Disney has done the attempt on witches and evil sorceresses before. Yeah. And this witch feels like a fun, happy version of the Black Cauldron witches. Which were weird, quirky, attempted to murder multiple people, but they also had, like, that witch quality to them. They had a cauldron. Yeah. They were doing crazy things. Their hair was all over the fucking place. Their nose was all over the fucking place. Yeah. Like, she feels like a classic Disney witch. Like, we've already seen her stereotypes
She
before.
feels very witch from Spirited Away.
Yeah, she feels like Yababa.
Yeah. That's the one. Yeah, so... also of note, the pendant Merida gives her has 3 bears on it.
It does. And also, if you pay attention, the medallion that she shows off originally is Mordew's symbol, the double axis crossed. Okay. And you only know this if you watch the special with the Secrets of Mordew or whatever it's called that's on the DVD. But also it's in the corners of the tapestries is the symbols of each brother.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
It was meant to play a bigger role at one point, because at one point they talked about having Merida go on this stupid quest where she has to find all of the tokens of every nation to bring her mom back.
Very fetch quest.
Very Inuyasha bullshitty. But they decided, no, that doesn't really prove our point of, like, that doesn't make our argument for this moral any better. Yeah. And so they got rid of it, but... there are, like, remnants of that.
Yeah, and one thing of note as well, because we all do see the four clans have their own symbols. Yes.
I can't remember them all, I just remember the one.
They're all just, like, pots or some stupid thing normally. Yeah. But one thing of note that I find interesting is that they mentioned that they had to cut like 1,000 scenes.
Yes.
Which
is a lot for an animated film.
Yeah.
Because, like, why would you waste your time animating that?
Yeah, and probably why this movie took so long to do, too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It also might be part of the reason why we had a weird director.
Yeah. And so, we find Merida's intentions also at this point, too, because she's thinking very childish. She's not looking for inner change, she's looking for outer change.
She wants her mom to change her mind.
Yeah, she's trying to change the world around her to make her life better.
But also, like, she hasn't thought what she wants all the way through. Because the second she says, I want to change my destiny, she says it, and everyone who's ever seen a, like, Genie episode of any bad guy show ever is like, that was not specific enough. Yeah. You need to be very specific. And, of course, she's not specific enough.
No. And so, after leaving the hut, Merida is magically back at the stone circle.
Because that's how teleportation works.
Yep. And we cut to her getting back to Castle Dunbrook. Yep. And the clans are singing against their war against Mor'du.
They've come up with a new drinking song so that they can all party.
Or it's one that they've had for a long time.
Yes, but, like, this is a new this is a new pub song that they created for this movie.
Oh, okay. I get what you're saying now.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, as Merida is sneaking in, her mother comes up behind her, and...
in true mom fashion.
She at first feels sympathetic.
Yeah.
But we also learn that she is still acting very childish, and that she points out that, hey, you still gotta set things straight. Yeah. You gotta follow what we want.
Yes, but also, like, this is the part where this is the second time that they could have talked about their differences, because the wording that Eleanor uses isn't what Eleanor actually was trying to say.
Yeah.
Because she gets across the point of, like, hey, you were gone, your dress is ripped to shreds, are you fucking okay? You just left.
Yeah, she's more worried about appeasing the rest of the clans, because that's one of the things she brings up is
you just insulted everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your dad's out there trying to make up songs to make them happy.
Or no, she's the only one who's appeased them. Her dad's just providing further entertainment.
Her dad is the stalling show.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. And so, like, her mom is trying to explain to her, like, hey, what you just did, we could all go to war over.
Yeah.
Like, you need to make that right. But she doesn't say that. She says, you need to make amends for this.
Yep.
Which, of course, doesn't read right to an angry 16-year-old brain.
And what does she do? She gives her the pastry.
Yeah, and there is a slight moment of hesitation at the beginning of this conversation where even you're like, okay, the child could even, like, be like, Mom, look, what if we did this instead? I just don't feel comfortable with this. No. It starts that way, and then she's like, oh, you want me to apologize and get married? No. Yeah, pastry for you. And then, of course, her mom eats it and is like, the hell did you make this with, you weird child?
It has a gamey taste, which makes me think it's a savory pastry and not...
I would like to think it's made out of bear parts. Which is gross.
Yeah, and bear... I've had bear sausage. It's not good.
No, bear's really not a super great meat to eat.
No, it...
You gotta cook the hell out of it.
And I actually have a little bit about that later, too.
Of course. And then, this is the part where this is a Pixar directive as opposed to a Disney. Mm-hmm. We leave the pastry on the counter with most of the pastry still there. Merida and her mom are walking off to go put her mom to bed because she now feels terrible.
Yeah, and the clans see them.
They do, but the pastry is still on the table, and we see the boys enter the kitchen, and that's it.
No, that's later on.
That's true. But...
that is later on. So they do get the mom back upstairs, who obviously isn't feeling well to the clans, and she's like, we'll figure this out.
We'll figure this out after I'm done puking. Yeah. Goodbye.
And in the bedroom, Eleanor transforms into the bear finally, and wrecks the room while Merida is still acting like a child and blames the witch for a bad spell and not her own actions for getting the pastry.
I mean, classic 16-year-old brain.
Yes. One thing that I also appreciate about this is the directors wanted to make this scene feel like a horror film.
And I like, because the music, the suspense.
Yeah.
And also, like, her mom is wrecking a room as a bear. But she's doing so because she is now a bear suddenly and doesn't know how to be a bear.
But also a horror comedy because the mom doesn't realize she's a bear.
Exactly. It works really nicely.
And about the bear and about most of the animals specifically in this movie.
Mostly bears.
The team made the decision to make them more realistic. again, because bears have been done before in a bunch of other things, like the Jungle Book, Robin Hood, Brother Bear.
Oh, yeah.
And they're all very humanist.
They are. And these bears, while still being, especially Eleanor, especially in Eleanor bear form, still very humanistic, but within the realm of bear. Yeah. They are not Baloo from the Jungle Book.
No, exactly.
Stretch. Yeah.
And so they also mentioned that a lot of these scenes were hard to shoot because castles are small.
Castles are small.
And
they do not have 10-foot ceilings.
Eleanor is a 9-foot bear, and Merida is 5'4". Because of this, I also found out that my buddy Sugi was fucking with me because I was going to make a meme to send to my friend group. Because our buddy Mark, who we've been calling a hobbit.
Yes.
Is only like an inch shorter than me. But Sugi told me he was 5'5", and I was going to make a comparison between him and Merida, like they've been doing with anime characters lately.
Yes. Yeah, where they just scale the body down.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but because the bear is so big, and Merida is arguably much shorter than a 9-foot bear, but also castles are, like, there's not a lot of depth for you. You can't pull the camera back far enough.
No.
Which means we get a lot of really interesting shots, which help make the bear feel gigantic.
Yeah, and that's one thing I always forget with computer animation is that they run very much like an actual film camera does.
Yeah, like, I mean, there's a wall that they've modeled there.
Yeah.
And unless they move the wall, how are you gonna... And if you move the wall, like, it might work, but people would question it.
Yeah, it's like viewporting. It's like when we do renders from viewports in Revit.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, out in the parting, the king now hears and smells a bear in the castle.
Because apparently this man's a fucking bloodhound and can sense a bear 100 miles away.
And,
hi, Charlie.
Hi, Charlie. And now the clans are on the hunt as Merida and Eleanor try and escape, which I love the triplets.
I do too.
In this scene.
They're so fucking cute.
Because...
My goodness.
Hi. I'm sorry I abandoned you for like 5 hours today.
Too long, so lonely.
It is also getting closer to feeding time, so there's that. But one thing I also like about the triplets is that they still kind of can tell the magic of being a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Because
they don't just walk through the castle. They teleport with random doorways.
Well, first what we see, not that part yet, but when the mom walks in on them, they're making a monstrosity out of, like, they're making a taxidermy chimera, but they're able to understand that this isn't a bear, it's their mom.
Yes.
As a bear.
Yes. And also they listen to her when she, in bear form, goes, no, put that fucking back.
Yeah.
And so when Merida comes in, they're putting the deer heads back on the wall.
Yeah.
Which I have a lot of questions about this taxidermy, but okay.
It's fine. And now we actually bring the triplets in, and like we talked about, the triplets are never at odds with Merida.
No.
But she still has to bribe them to do her bidding.
Because they're still siblings.
Yes, exactly. And so they lead the men on a wild goose chase or a wild bear chase.
With a roast chicken on a stick and a bull pretending to yell in it to be a bear. It's gold. The chicken on the stick was originally going to be a, like, real rough wood puppet bear that they had, like, carved on the go. Mm-hmm. And they're like, no, they don't even have time to carve a bear stick. What do they got at hand? And someone was like, I don't know, a roast chicken? They're like, yeah, put a roast chicken on a stick.
I like it, because it just adds to the stupidity of this scene.
It does.
And so, eventually the triplets succeed in leading the rest of the clans up to the roof.
And locking them out there.
And now they're able... And then they finally scare away the maid. And
yes. This poor maid, I like that they made her a recurring character, because it would have been easy for her to have just been, like, a one-time, like, funny character, but the fact that she's constantly in it makes you feel like she's, like, a maid of honor, or governess, or, you know, a handmaid of some kind, or maybe the lead cook. I like to think she's a lead cook.
Yeah.
Yeah. She feels important to the family.
She feels plump enough to be a cook.
She does. Also, she makes apparently fantastic donuts, because the children have stolen them 2 or 3 times now.
I could not stop thinking of Skyrim and sweet rolls.
I really want them.
Maybe. And so, Eleanor and Merida are able to escape as now the triplets eye the pastry.
Yes. And I like that we end at that.
Yes.
Because that's all I need.
And then we cut to the king and gang escaping by tying their kilts together, showing the most butts ever seen in a Disney or Pixar movie.
And Pixar counted this part as nudity.
Yes.
And thus, this was the first animated Pixar film with nudity in it.
And I think because of it got like a PG rating.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Too many butts.
I will say most butts, but not the only butts, as, what was that one we watched for the short? I didn't watch, I watched it as a side thing. There's a Disney, like, back when Disney was trying to have, like, more adult films.
Oh, yes.
There's butts.
Of course, because butts are hilarious.
It's a very nice woman's butt. Just floating in water.
Butts are butts.
Yes, they're nice.
A butt's a butt and butt's a funny.
Yes. And so now Merida takes her mom to the circle to,
They gotta refine that stupid witch who scammed her. Gotta get your money back.
Yeah, find the cottage to find an answer, but the witch is gone and she's left an answering cauldron.
I love this because this feels like she's like a scammy business person, but also like Merida just bought all her carvings of a bear. This woman's finally going on a Disney cruise along with the genie from Aladdin.
And where is she off to?
I don't remember.
The Wicker Man Festival.
Oh, right.
And Stornoway.
Yes, she is. That's right. And I love that she leaves little bottles for, like, the different answering buttons. Mm-hmm. So, like, press 1 for this, put in the red vial for this. And if you're the silly red-haired girl with the bear problem, let me know.
Yeah. Side note, for those who do not love horror like I do.
Yes.
This reference is clearly a reference to the 1973 cult classic horror film, The Wicker Man.
Of course it is.
As Stornoway is a town on the Hebrides, the Hebrides archipelago, which is also the same archipelago featured in the Wicker Man movies.
Oh, she's gonna go have fun with them.
Yeah.
And they're, person burning fun.
Bees!
Also, like, she is a witch, so yeah, okay.
Also, Nicolas Cage dresses up as a bear and clocks a woman in it.
That's true, it's all bears.
Yeah, yeah. And so the crew actually and the directors had a hard time balancing how modern they wanted the cauldron to sound.
Yes, because, like, you don't want it to be too modern, because then you pull the problem with, like, oh, you made that joke?
Yeah, which I think they did a good job of weeding it out into something different, because, like, at one point they say, and if you want to speak with a live homunculus...
Yeah, which is very cute.
Like, they took plays on it and did something fun with it.
Yeah, there's not, like, a character flossing in the background. This is a fun, like, okay, it doesn't matter what age this film gets to, this is still going to be a thing people deal with. Yeah,
so... and as we learn the consequences of the spell, that if they do not patch up their issues, Eleanor will permanently become a bear after the third sunrise.
Oh no!
And in her panic, Merida destroys the answering cauldron
by putting all the potions in at once
and blowing up the cottage. But first, before that, she tries opening and closing the door to get it to change.
I like it.
Yeah,
it's very cute.
Yeah, and so as this happens, a storm rolls in. And we cut to a flashback of her mother singing a lullaby while Merida tries to comfort her.
Yes.
And she begins humming the lullaby herself.
Mm-hmm.
And we get the starting of inklings that Merida realizes the further hurt she's caused. Because because she's trying to comfort her mom like her mom comforted her as a child, but it doesn't work because her mom's not a child.
Exactly.
And so she's also starting to use what she's learned from her mother. And so this is the start of her growing as a character.
Definitely. This is also the first time that she's thinking about her mom's side of the story, which is a huge step for a teenager.
Yeah. And side note, the lullaby song that they use as a holdover for this portion was actually a song about drowning at sea until they could find a better song.
You know what? That's how most children's stories are.
But they picked it because they thought it was a nice Gaelic song, and they didn't know that it was.
I understand. I have also picked many a Gaelic song because it sounds nice and it ends up being about death.
And also, like, we forget so much, like, there's so much history and stuff. Like, I recently found out, one of the Battlefield band songs is actually about a real historical event. Yeah, and I'm like, oh, okay, interesting.
Yes.
So.
Also, this lullaby, its melody got put into a couple other songs that run throughout the background parts of some of the other orchestra pieces, and that was supposed to have then been turned into a lullaby duet that Merida and her mother were supposed to sing together.
Okay.
But that got cut because A, they didn't have time for it, and B, it felt a little bit weird and rushed. So they cut that duet.
Nice. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like learning these little things of what could have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in the morning, Mom has prepared a breakfast of nightshade berries and wormy water.
Yeah, she tried. And she even made like little plates and a table. She tries.
She tried. And they did a very good job of making a distinction of when Mom is still in her right mind.
Yes.
Because she acts like Mom.
She does. She sits upright. She keeps her hands politely to herself. And also a very important change, which they did, and they didn't... They tried to make everyone that's an animal a realistic animal. Mm-hmm. With one teeny tiny exception. When she's a mom, her eyes are human eyes.
Yes.
And when she's a bear, they are full bear.
Yeah.
And that's a big distinction because they use it later on to help show, not just in body language, but visually that she's changed. And it's something you don't think about until you do have to draw animals a lot. It's like, wow, y'all's eyes take up a lot of room in your eyeball.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's
something that you, like, if you draw animals frequently, you realize, but it is something that makes a cartoon version of an animal humanistic.
Okay. Yeah. I get that, because, like, especially, like, in the manga and anime world.
Yes.
I've seen realistic animals, and they do them quite well, too.
Yes, but that is a skill that, like, we haven't quite gotten to in the caricature Western style.
No.
Yeah.
No, not at all. And so, now the roles are reversed. It is truly Merida's turn to teach her mom the ways of the wild.
Yes, we're going to go find some fish, damn it.
Yep, and now we are showing her mother her world. So we're getting a crossover of a couple things where Merida's using what her mom taught her, but also teaching her mom that this is the beauty of what I see and what I want to do.
Yes, and it's also the first time, probably since Eleanor was a child, that she's been allowed to not be a queen.
Yeah.
Which you have to relearn. You don't just get to suddenly be free. You have to relearn how to have fun and to explore and be one with nature, as Eleanor gets to learn.
I will be going through and taking an actual vacation in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, you have to relearn how to do that.
Yeah, I am actually, because that hit me today, and I'm like, I don't know how to shut down right now.
Yeah, you have to not do things for 8 hours.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, but
yeah.
Anyway, so there is a montage of fishing, which
it's very cute.
Also would have been a character song in a standard Disney and Pixar movie.
Potentially, there have been a couple of Disney films where this sort of action, like, sequence gets a worded song, but it's not necessarily sung. That's pretty common.
And this one has a worded song behind it.
But you're not focused on the words.
No.
You're very focused on what the two are doing.
No. And, side note, this scene alone took 1 year to make because of the water.
And, like, once you get told, hey, look at the water, isn't that beautiful? You're like, holy shit, yeah, it looks really good, even on my new TV, and even though this movie's almost 10 years old.
Oh, that just hit me now, too.
You're old. Congrats.
Well, I mean, I didn't realize we were doing, like, that old movies back to back.
It doesn't feel like an old movie, though, does it? And part of the reason is because they bothered to put in this effort into the animation, especially water, because we've seen some animated water that, oh boy, that can age your film really fast.
Yeah, or you just go the Toy Story route and don't put water or hair because you can't do it.
And then all of your children end up being the same child. Whoops.
Whoopsies. Yeah. And so, now, after the montage scene, Mom begins to walk off, and Merida follows, but something's wrong.
Yeah, she's not standing up on two legs and being queenie.
She's not acting her normal self.
She's acting a lot like a bear.
And as she begins to rush Merida, she comes to her senses, just as wisps appear and guide them to a set of ruins with a pair of cross axes above the arch.
Yes. Which I like that we are never, like, directly spokenly told, like, hey, you remember that Mordu guy? Wouldn't it be crazy if all of those old stories you said were real? I like this sort of self-discovering process.
Yeah, because I like this too because it's also, like, where legends divide and change over time.
Yes.
Because side other note, the ruins were actually meant to be devoid of life.
Yes.
And we also see changes in history as well, because Merida crashes into the ruins of a throne room that has a stone depicting her own plight of 3 brothers that's been cracked in half.
Yes.
And now the dots are connecting, and we learn at this point that Mor'du is the king from the old story,
yes.
or the same person, and they are under the same curse from that witch.
And that might be part of the reason she's had such terrible customer reviews.
Yeah. Exactly. He might have been the last customer, too.
We don't know, but we like to assume. But also, like, what's that in the shadows? What's that in the inky, shadowy shadows?
'Tis Mor'du.
It is. This is also, for Pixar, one of the darkest scenes they've ever animated.
Yes. Well,
there are actual human bones on the ground.
Yeah.
Which Pixar was not used to doing. Disney, a little bit more familiar with putting our dead relatives all around the floor.
Yeah.
Looking at you, Lion King.
Yeah, I just saw someone break down that Scar playing with the skull is a lion skull.
It's not a lion skull, it's a hyena skull.
There's a scene where they do break it down. There's a part where he is playing with... There are lion skulls.
Oh, they're definitely lion skulls,
yeah.
But the Hamlet scene is not a lion skull.
Oh, no, I'm not thinking of the Hamlet scene. There's another part.
There is, but like,
yeah.
Disney, despite what Disney would like to think, Disney is very accustomed to going dark, scary, and killing people as quickly as possible.
Look at all their reboots.
Their reboots are a good example, but even their old stuff, even like princesses who are not currently considered princesses for various reasons, despite my dismay, almost dead, one very dead, parents dead, lots of people being sucked into cauldrons for various reasons, an entire bad guy who is literally dead. Disney's used to bones and guts, but Pixar was used to fun, really cartoony things.
Yeah, now that you're bringing this up, it feels odd as a Pixar movie, too.
Yeah, this is part of the reason why when people start listing Disney and Pixar films, this one doesn't get it in their heads as a Disney or Pixar film. This is like, unless you're really in love with this film, you quickly forget that this is a Disney Pixar film. You kind of put it off into a different into a different bucket, kind of like you do with Anastasia or Black Cauldron, despite both of those being major brands. Yeah,
interesting. I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah, partially because of all the bones. And also the bear coming to kill Merida.
There are a lot of bones.
There's a lot of bones in this room.
Side other little note, in the flashback scene, there is a part where the king's head is replaced with a bear's head.
Yes.
And that was the director's homage to Porco Rosso.
Which is a delightful, cute Ghibli film.
Which is also kind of a weird one because it's very much an adult-centered Ghibli film.
It is an adult-centered Ghibli film, but also, like, that's kind of, like, I appreciate that he bothered to, like, bring that into the front of his mind, because this is arguably a more adult-centered children's film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so, now that Mor'du chases them, the pair now flee and decide that they need to infiltrate the castle.
Yes, this is also our first scene where we see the daughter and the mother fully rely on each other.
Yeah, because, well, and that's the other thing, too, that we're learning, is that they realize that they have to mend the bond, but they're thinking that the simple act of tying the tapestry together is going to fix it.
Yes, and, like, on top of that, like, we don't truly know what Eleanor's thought is, because she's still a bear, and, like, her vocabulary is bear.
I mean, yeah.
And so, like, they both know they have to work together, but also, like, this is the part where they've both grown enough to start to work together.
Yeah.
But we haven't quite gotten to the key moment of, like, true understanding.
Yeah.
Like, this is... I like that there is a step, because a lot of these, especially Disney movies, take a huge leap in the understanding of the characters and the, like, lesson to be learned. Like, they get 2 + 2 immediately, as opposed to, like, kind of figuring it out. Okay, yeah. I got it. And this movie does a good job of, like, leading us into that moment.
Yeah. No, that's quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, now inside the castle, we learn that it's all gone to shit, Kupo.
It's all gone to shit. But also, I'm impressed that her father has kept the, peace this long.
I wouldn't say they've kept the peace. They've turned over the dinner tables.
It looks like a snowball fight's gonna happen at any second.
Yes, and Now it's up to Merida to stop the fighting, like Eleanor did, but she does it in her own way.
She does.
And this is really the start of their mending.
Yes.
Because while Eleanor's trying to sneak up, she gets so caught up in Merida's speech saying like, hey, remember that we're supposed to be united. We're the 4 kingdoms. Yes. We are what keep this country all strong.
Yeah, we're all brothers. We've all got each other's back. She's reminding them of how they've helped their own, their own lords.
Yeah, and on top of that, she's also she's breaking traditions, but she's also putting logic behind it that she was shocked by this. She doesn't want this, and she's pretty sure none of the other Lord's sons want this either.
And the second she brings them up, boom, behind their dads, they show up and they're like, yeah, no, I was busy doing things.
Yeah.
Other than being married.
Yeah.
You're fine, you're not dead yet, can we hold off?
Yeah, exactly.
I also like this too because this is the epitome where Merida fully grasps what her mom was trying to teach her, and that her mom originally was trying to make her her. And this is the part where both of them get to see, like, there is a way to take these qualities of a leader that Eleanor was trying to instruct, that her father probably should have also been trying to learn at the same time, because this man could use the same lesson. And this is how you gain respect, but you can do so with your own twist.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's such a great...
It's a great lesson also on, like, just public speaking in general.
Yeah, no, it's... If you just take a moment to calm down and talk.
And hold yourself in a way that evokes respect.
Yep.
Don't slouch, don't come in with an apple in your mouth, and people will take you seriously.
Yeah, exactly. And so, now Merida, to get them out, suggests that they tap into her father's reserves, which
is in the cellar. Everyone go down there. And I love her dad, who has just witnessed such personal growth and is still not found his wife or daughter, or this bear in his house, is like, get out the small glasses. The really small glasses.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's his reserves.
It's his wine. It's fancy wine.
Yeah. And so, now, upstairs, Merida suggests, while the two are repairing the tapestry.
Yes.
Fergus, or they both get upstairs, start repairing the tapestry. Fergus comes up to discover that
in
Eleanor's room has been torn to shreds.
Yes.
And now he bursts into the tapestry room where...
There's a freaking bear in there.
Yeah, because Eleanor has become full bear. And one thing they note is she only becomes bear when it comes to food.
Yes. I also like that at one point they were going to have her, like, Werewolf of London transform and, like, sometimes be a little bit more human than bear and other times be full bear. And I like that they kept her a bear visually the entire time, because the parts where the directors were piping up, or the animators were piping up saying, like, oh, this was the part where we played with her changing back.
Yeah.
Or having, like, humanistic face qualities, or like more hands as opposed to bare hands.
Yeah.
But like, this makes this whole movie super believable, is that she looks like a bear the whole time.
Yeah.
And the eye change is subtle.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, of course Fergus is like, it's a freaking bear in my house.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Yeah, exactly.
Time to murder the bear, like all the other bears.
Yep. And so,
oh my.
Shush, Charlie. So now Fergus tries fighting Eleanor.
Yes.
Who eventually does turn back to herself and realizes that in the scuffle, because Merida's trying to protect her because she's her mom, she still cares for her.
Yeah.
She has injured Merida.
Yeah.
In kind of a way, because it kind of reflects when she threw the bow into the fire.
Yes.
Where she does it out of instinct, but then the moment she realizes what she's done, she's remorseful.
Yes.
And at this time, she can't control it.
No, we are getting close to the point of no return.
Yeah. And now, she goes on the run as the clans begin to actually hunt her down, and Merida is locked in a room because Fergus thinks she's gone crazy.
Which, I now understand why Eleanor gave up trying to teach Fergus anything.
It's like me trying to teach Charlie to do anything.
He listens.
No, he doesn't. He don't do shit. And so while trapped in, trying to make her escape, who shall appear?
The boys.
3 beady little eyes from the darkness.
And of course, they have turned into the most adorable baby bear cubs of all time. And does this bother her? Oh no.
No.
She just looks at them, looks at the cook who now has the key, looks back at her brothers and is like, get the key. And they're like, yes ma'am, roger, roger. And I love how the boys are like, well, we're bears now, this is fun.
And they proceed to do it Mission Impossible style by
lowering themselves into her boobs.
Not lowering, diving into her tits.
I love it. I also love that we get to see that the boys do have individual personalities to an extent. One of them is horrified by the thought of being dove into boobs, and the other one thinks this is hilarious.
No, he's not even hilarious. He's like, fuck yeah.
Yeah. Are you watching?
Yeah. And so now Merida, freed, takes the tapestry to the circle where her mom is caught in a fight with Fergus and the rest of the clan.
I will say, the act of her ripping the tapestry off the wall and then putting it and the boys on the horse and hand sewing it while riding through the woods, very epic, especially knowing that tapestry probably weighed an absolute motherload shit ton. Yeah. This girl is hella fucking strong. She ripped a tapestry off of its metal hangings on the stone wall and then put it on her horse. Luckily, her horse is a Clydesdale. Yeah. And it was like, all right, go. Also, there's bears on your back. And the horse is like, what? Cool.
Well, I think the horse would be okay with it because, as we know, the horse has a sense for magic and he knows that the bears aren't bears.
Yes, also this horse seems to be like, I will do whatever my dear sweet Merida wants me to.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to bring up about this, because they're not in the movie that much.
No.
When I was getting my hair cut the other day, I brought up that part of Brave doesn't feel like like the traditional Disney or Pixar movie because there's not animal sidekicks.
Yeah.
And the person next to me brought up that the bears fill that criteria, but they don't really.
They don't because they are only bears for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
But they are her baby brothers, and you could argue that baby brother is also a sidekick, only a less marketable one. I would say that the reason they don't feel like sidekicks to you is because part of the role of a Disney sidekick is to be a toy, specifically a plush, that then can be sold. Because, let's be real, most kids, that's the character they connect with, and that's what's easiest to give them.
It's about the merch.
Yeah, and whether or not you like it, that's part of making a kids film, and that's part of making a successful kids film, is being able to give their audience what they want. And if 6-year-olds want a fucking plushie of a snowman who sings and dances, you better fucking make a plushie of a snowman who sings and dances.
I still don't like Olaf after seeing it.
You're not the target audience.
No, I know I'm not. I know.
And the target audience said that Olaf was gold.
Yeah.
And so, part of the reason why they couldn't market the boys, even though a lot of adults felt like they were cute sidekicks, is there's 3 of them. And you can't have a 3-piece sidekick that has to then be sold separately. Because unlike other, group side characters, they are individuals. They all 3 have names. Harrison, Haribo, they all start with H. And, they are individual. So you can't, squish them together.
Harris, Hubert, and Hamish.
There you go. And so because they are not animated as a homogeneous glob, like other animation groups do, you can't be like, all right, pick your favorite of the triplets.
Because they all look the same.
Because they all look the same, even though they are different, because that's how triplets work.
Yeah.
But I would argue that in more recent years, the horse has become the stuffy marketing thing. You can buy stuffs of him, you can buy clay toys of him. When the doll came with the horse at one point, I think. Don't quote me on that. I don't buy the dolls. But, he is, because this is a weird Disney Pixar hybrid. Yeah. The horse has fulfilled the role of the Disney needing a merchandising toy. Also, they sold a shit ton of her bow. They had a little plastic one with a little rubber string. They sold so many archery bows, and there were so many little girls who were like, I need to be a bow and arrow master!
And Frozen sold recorders.
I mean, equally as obnoxious, just in a different way.
Exactly. Actually, I can't say shit because I went to the Viking Museum in York in middle school, and I bought a bow.
I think most kids, when you and I were the age that this target audience would have been for bows, we had Robin Hood, the the Fox version.
Well, I was like super into medieval weaponry and castles at the time.
Okay, so you were a weird kid. Got
yes,
it.
Yeah.
But like a lot of us were like, I need to be Robin Hood, specifically the Fox version.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the kid.
So like,
I'm the kid who thought the York dungeons were the coolest part of my trip to York.
Let's be very clear. Children will always pick the A, most dangerous, and B, most obnoxious piece of any movie and merchandising to be like, that's
True.
The thing I need. Whether that's drums, recorders, the stupid flute thing from Zelda, like, that's what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
That's just how kids be.
And for those who don't know, and are not in the UK, the York Dungeons is a wax torture museum.
Of course they are.
Yeah, I was a weirdo.
This explains a lot.
Yes. And so, anywho, enough of our tangent. Back to Brave.
Yes.
Merida comes in and protects her mom and takes down Fergus in a very diplomatic manner.
Yes, but also in a Fergus manner.
Yeah.
She sword fights him and cuts off his wooden leg.
Yeah. Takes out the one...
The one leg he had to stand on?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. And so, in this, Mor'du appears.
Yes.
And Eleanor now springs into action.
As, another bear.
Yeah, eventually pushing Mor'du into one of the stones that falls on him and crushes him. And in Disney Pixar fashion, releases his spirit because it has to have some kind of happy ending. And they felt bad for killing him, but they felt bad because at this point he wasn't himself. He was a bear.
Yeah. And also, like, if they hadn't shown him quote unquote passing on into being a wisp, it would have left you with this ambiguity of like, well, he's been alive this long, and he's been shot, stabbed, and speared. He's
been burned. His back's missing hair.
Yeah, so like, what's to say that this bear's not frickin' immortal, and this rock did nothing, and he'll dig himself out in a couple days? Yeah. So like, while it is a little Disney corny campy to have like the spirit moving on into being a wisp that then leads others onto their destiny. Yeah, it's a little corny, but also like it does plug a giant hole in the plot. Yeah,
it's a fitting ending. It's not just happy to be happy.
It is. It's also the only wisp who gets a human face of any kind, which works out very nicely.
Yeah. Oh, it's pretty good. One other thing I do like at the start of the fight is that Fergus still tries protecting Merida.
Yes.
By punching Mor'du in the face.
Because, again, this man hasn't learned any diplomacy.
Yeah, exactly.
In 16 years, hasn't learned a single piece.
Yep. And also, side other thing about Mor'du being turned back is that it's nice because it's also another little side thing of like his ambition cursed him.
Yeah, because like you could make the argument, and granted they try really hard to make like his intentions seem bad, but like if you look at history, every kingdom that's been divided into multiple siblings hasn't done super great, aka isn't around anymore.
Yeah.
So like you can understand how like maybe he did have some best interests at heart, but took it all the wrong way and asked for it the wrong way.
Yeah, same how Eleanor treated Merida.
Exactly.
And how Merida rebelled.
Exactly. And so I do like that his ending also feels like him congratulating them on figuring it out. Yeah.
And so Merida drapes Eleanor in the tapestry as the sun rises, but she is still a bear.
And at this point, she is bear. Not even mom bear.
And at this point, Merida believes that they failed because the tapestry was supposed to be the bond in the solution.
Yeah.
But Merida admitting to her mistakes is what really breaks the curse. And her mother learned her lesson early on.
Yeah. But that's how this works.
Exactly. And so it's also the magic has to come from inside, and that one has to be brave enough to say what they want and to be yourself.
Yes, very cute.
And so now Eleanor is now turned human and quite naked still.
Luckily she got a big ass tapestry to hide behind.
But apparently the guys are still taking a peek. And she has to, Fergus, I'm naked.
Naked as a wee babby.
Yeah.
But also like I do appreciate, because this is, whether or not you like it, re-emphasizing the fact that there are only 2 ladies on this fucking island, apparently.
Yeah. Well, sorry, no.
Oh,
there's
3.
more.
There's
there's
3.
also the fan club.
I guess we've yet to see them yet. We know of exactly 3 with names.
Yeah, because I think her name's Doris is the maid.
She has a name. It's not very well rememberable. I keep calling her Bridget. I know that's not her name, but I keep calling her that.
No. And so also the triplets are human and are running stark naked.
As we naked babbies.
Yep. And so we cut to the mother and the daughter working on a new tapestry as the clan sail off and
kidnap the boys because they've jumped ship.
The boys kidnap themselves.
The boys totally kidnap themselves. I will say there is a very nice detail. They are working on the new tapestry together. It does seem like they've gotten quite far since, there's 2 of them now working on it. And it seems to be something they're passionately working on as like a fun together activity, which if you think about the time period and how many activities there were to do, not a lot. This is a good together activity, the equivalent of like watching TV or coloring.
Yeah.
Because you don't got either of those activities. But in the background is the old tapestry, and her mother has been trying to sew it back together. It's just no longer the predominant wall fixture.
Yeah, and the new tapestry has the bears sewn into. And
it's them looking at each other.
Yep.
As opposed to her mom being on one side of the family, and then the boys and her dad and her mom and her all on the other side.
Yep.
Almost like not together.
Yep.
This one is a much more together vibe.
It's a nice little touch, because as the boats sail away as well, they're out horseback riding together.
And also at this point, for the first time in the whole movie, we get to see Eleanor with her hair unbraided.
Yep.
Which is an impressive feat, because Eleanor has a lot of hair, and like letting it fly free in the wind sounds majestic and everything, but I've had long ass hair.
Yeah.
Pain in the ass.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I like the like symbolism.
I do too. And we also get the little bit that Eleanor forgot that she taught Merida to have fun, because the horseback riding is from her and not her father.
Exactly.
Because Fergus probably can't ride a horse.
The man's way too big.
And he has a peg leg.
He does have a peg leg.
Yeah. And so before we get into like the legacy and our little conclusions, I've got some questions.
Okay.
And it's a stupid question. I'm aware.
That's okay.
So, as we mentioned, we have to cook the shit out of bears, because bears often have, to this point, we're pretty certain they all have the Trichina spiralis parasite, which is deadly to humans.
Yeah.
Do you think that if they caught it as a bear, it would still be with them when they turn back?
Okay, that's kind of a tricky question. Because part of the reason bears have not just that parasite, but quite a lot of parasites, is because they're omnivorous and also
can't cook.
They can't cook, and bears also will find food and be happy and content with just finding a kill.
Yeah.
Which adds the parasite level. Eating dead shit off the ground gonna add worms to it. And so probably yes, because unlike vultures whose stomach acid kills parasites, bears just kind of continue living and bearing through parasites.
Yeah.
Mostly because, like, they're bears, it's not a big deal, they've got a lot of body weight, they're not trying to, like...
Yeah.
And the stuff they're eating isn't nearly as dead as other scavengers that do have that ability.
True.
They also aren't bone eaters like hyenas, whose stomach acid is meant to break down bones.
Yeah.
Thus also breaking down gross things. So, probably, but also at this time and period...
Everyone had parasites.
Everyone had parasites. Part of the reason why everyone's dead. But I like, and this kind of ties back into the animation team. The animation team bothered to give everyone in this movie bad teeth.
Yeah.
Which, again, not a very Disney thing to do until very recently. But historically accurate. Not too historically accurate, because at this time period, sugar wouldn't have been a staple in their diet.
Yeah.
And as we learn, sugar and forks really fucked people's teeth up. And both of those things weren't predominant in food. Knives were kind of the way to go back in this time period.
Yeah.
Knives and hands. So, would they have had bad teeth? Of course. Would it have been real bad? No. But also, like, you would have probably...
Slightly more parasites. Because she does eat cooked fish. So.
Oh, yeah.
And besides the nightshade berries and the wormy water, that's about all we see.
Yeah, and salmon, especially fresh salmon's usually not considered a danger food. So
depends on the salmon, because Pacific salmon, there's a reason salmon sushi is not Japanese and actually comes from Sweden.
Yes.
Or Scandinavia, because Atlantic salmon does not have the parasites that Pacific salmon does.
True.
Yeah.
But we can assume that everyone's
wormy.
Everyone has wormy.
Especially the brothers.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so that is Brave.
That is Brave. A good movie. And it ends with our heroine giving us a little dialogue about how she's learned and grown and how everyone can change their fate, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Very cute.
Yes. So, I know when Brave first was released, it had generally positive reviews.
Yes.
But I also know a lot of hardcore Disney princess purists were not super thrilled with Merida being included as the 11th Disney princess.
Yes. And I can kind of explain why.
Okay. Please do. Because I am a dipshit when it comes to this stuff.
Okay, so the Disney princess is a kind of a weird thing. So there is, of course, your OG 3. Snow White, Cinderella, and Aurora. And
Aurora is Sleeping Beauty, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And they were made they're the OG ones because for a long time they were the only princesses that Disney made. You could make the argument that Cinderella and Aurora are just reproductions of Snow White in certain ways, but also their morals, their time period was of a very different era.
Yeah, aren't they all 3 Grimm's fairy tales?
They are. They are all original fairy tales. But we do get more Grimm fairy tales after that. And then not just Grimm, but a couple other fairy tales.
Okay.
So the reason why people originally weren't super stoked about Merida being a Disney princess is A, she's not purely Disney. She's Pixar Disney, which for some people is a big deal.
Yeah.
For others, it's not. It depends on who you are and what ballpark you play in. But the other thing is the Disney princesses who came before her were... So we've got the original 3, and then we moved on to Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, and Pocahontas for a long time. And those were kind of our Disney princesses for a while.
Okay.
We had other entries for a while. Tinkerbell was briefly a Disney princess, but because she had then got her own franchise, she's since been dropped. She's no longer an official princess.
Okay.
So the Disney princess criteria doesn't mean you have to actually be a princess. It helps. It definitely helps. But
Merida is technically a princess.
But Pocahontas isn't. Pocahontas is the daughter of a chief.
And, okay, in the European traditional sense, Pocahontas would be a princess.
Sure. Belle's not a princess.
Yeah.
Sure, she later on marries what the story calls a prince, but that's...
Same with Cinderella.
Yes, Cinderella.
I think at one point in the story they have to be they have to be somewhat of a princess outside of Mulan.
Mulan is the other odd one out. Kind of. So Moana is also the newest Disney princess, and she's also the daughter of a chief. And a lot of people, like, especially people who come from these traditions and these cultures, do want there to be a difference between princess and daughter of chief. Yeah, they feel like that is an important part of their culture and their heritage, and that it is not that it is not the same, that it holds too much weight in the word princess.
Okay.
Which is fair, but at this point, Disney has deemed them both princesses, and what you gonna do about it? Rapunzel spends most of her life not a princess. Also, a lot of them spend most of their life not as a princess, whereas Merida does. Yeah. Merida is a princess from the get-go. The other reason why a lot of people weren't super big fan of her is the other princesses, with the exception of the OG3, who are kind of weird because the lessons they teach are super Grimm fairy tale style, as opposed to the later ones who, while they are Grimm fairy tales, teach a more, like, modern lesson. Merida teaches a solely modern lesson. Even Rapunzel's identity of self, who she got a little bit of, like, is she also a princess now? Oh boy, we've just stacked on more. It was also getting to the point where we had a lot of princesses. For a long time, it was all the way up until just Pocahontas and Mulan. And a lot of people were like, that's already a lot of princesses.
Yeah, because I know at one point they did, I think it was like early 2000 or mid 2000s, they decided that they are doing specifically Disney Princess as its own line.
Yes. The other thing to keep in mind is Disney has taken out princesses, and a lot of people felt that, like, she was replacing princesses. Like, they had taken out Esmeralda from Hunchback of Notre Dame. She was for a while a Disney princess, and then she was removed. Because her movie wasn't doing super well, her merchandise didn't do super well.
Yeah.
And also her meet and greets weren't quite as what people wanted. People wanted a ball gown dress. It was also kind of hard to redesign Esmeralda's character to fit the different art types that were needed.
Okay.
And then Jane Porter was also a princess for a long time, and she's the girl from Tarzan. And she is popular. People love Tarzan. But she has a ball dress. She starts the movie.
I'm sorry, my brother asked me about a month or so ago when we were playing if Tarzan was clapping them gorilla cheeks before he met Jane.
We will never know.
That's a whole different
episode. But a lot of people's suspicion why Jane was dropped, because Jane does fit all of the things. Tarzan's always done well. It still does well.
Yeah.
It has a live action remake.
I forget that it does.
A lot of people do, don't worry. You're okay forgetting that. But she has a ball dress. She has a cute side character. She has two cute side characters.
Yeah.
She has a handsome prince. She's not a technical princess, but that's pretty easily overlooked.
Okay.
The only downside was her color is yellow. And Belle's dress is also yellow. And so a lot of people...
Branding.
Yeah, so a lot of people felt that Jane was dropped because she was too close to Belle.
So there's a lot of inner turmoil.
There is. And there's a lot of people who felt that Merida was taking a place of a more deserving girl. Anastasia being one of them. Nala being one of them. Granted, it's a little hard to do a live-action meet with Nala since she's a lion. But, there's a lot of people who felt that, other girls could have been princesses. And especially more recently, because Disney has been taking on some of its more cartoon princesses and bringing them into the live-action meet and greets. And while they're not officially part of the Disney 12 princesses, they still end up in lineups, they still end up in photo shoots, and they still end up in meet and greets, which is a big part of what people imagine when they want princesses, because while it feels weird and corny for adults, it really is a big deal for little kids.
Yeah.
And so for a while there was a lot of heat on whether or not Merida should be part of this Disney lineup. She didn't feel like a princess, she didn't act like a princess, and the lesson that she taught, while a good one, wasn't necessarily a princess lesson.
No, it was just a life lesson.
It's just how to grow up,
as
opposed to how to be a good person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's a weird thing too, because it feels like Merida her lesson is more aimed at preteens and teenagers.
Most of the other ones. Yeah, most of the others. Oh, hi. Most of the other lessons are things that, granted, everyone should learn.
Yeah.
But most of the other princesses' stories and lessons are more geared towards little kids.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, there was some heat originally. Since then, she has well blended in. Most people happily put her in. Will people remember her in the Disney lineup? Not unless you're a hard princess fan, and even then, it's kind of hard to guess who's who, because they themselves confuse it quite a lot.
Yeah.
But since then, she has easily become a lot of people's favorite meet and greet.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know a lot of Disney, so I'm glad you know more than I do.
And granted, I say all this with some feeling of expertise, but the workings of Disney and how to keep a worldwide chain like this going is really intricate and hard, and there's a lot of pegs and people making decisions. So, granted, you can't make literally 6 theme parks, maybe more's worth of people happy.
Oh, no, absolutely. And speaking of turmoil and inner workings, kind of want to close off with a little bit on Chapman.
Yes.
And her role in this. So, one thing I do want to note before we go into that a little bit is that despite being replaced as the director, Chapman was actually happy, or she mentioned she was happy with the ending, or the end product overall.
Yeah, she has come out and said that she is proud of the film that they created, even if it isn't necessarily exactly what she would have made.
Yeah, no, and I So, you mentioned creative differences.
That's what the official language was.
Yeah, which, I mean, is possible. I mean...
It is.
To be fair, still early 2010s. I mean, being a woman in a heavily male-dominated field, which I still see in our field pop up every now and then.
Unfortunately, yeah. And she took this with the elegance and grace of a queen.
Yeah.
She, while was upset, she didn't come out with a long spiel about it. She handled it for the time period as best she could. She moved on and tried to have it open new doors for her. She moved on to work with DreamWorks and with her husband and with Lucasfilms.
Yeah.
She's gone on to direct lots of other stuff. She's gone on to... I think she's trying to work on a new film herself. Yeah,
she's starting to dive into the live action world. So.
Which I think she'll be really successful at, because all the films that she helped with, like, the creative direction on have been very good and empowered films.
Yeah.
But there has been, in especially more recent years, a lot of people, especially women, in specifically Pixar, but Disney is not free from this at all.
Yeah.
Coming out and saying, yeah, it's not just a boy world. It's hard to even exist in this boy world.
Yeah.
It's hard to get work done. It's hard to, like, get your ideas across. There's a lot of terrible sexism, unfortunately, that happens. And whether or not she had that problem is up for her and her to say, but a lot of people who worked with her and who have since come forward have been like, yeah, you can say something smart and they'll brush it off as stupid.
Yeah.
But the second your male counterpart says it, it's a genius idea and we should all do it.
Yeah.
Which sucks, but, you know, I'm at least glad her film got made.
Yeah, I am too. And on top of that, a strong female role. And we talked about it a little bit, because Merida as a strong female role is interpretive.
It is. And I do like that we have continued to reinterpret it, because while I find a lot of strength with the original princesses, minus Aurora, who I just aesthetically like, she doesn't do a whole lot. And I like the new...
she sleeps.
She does. She sleeps. Honestly, the story's not about her. It's about her fairy godmothers.
Yeah. She falls... She's born, she pricks her finger, and she sleeps most of the movie.
She does. I will say, the girl transitions from being a poor orphan child with 3 godmothers living alone in the woods to being a princess very well. She handles that nicely.
Right. I feel stupid now, because I actually have not really... I don't remember a lot of that movie.
It's okay. It's one of my favorites. Okay. I watch it regularly, but while a lot of people like to think that it's Aurora's story, it's not. It's about the growth of her godmothers.
Okay.
And she just happens to be the main character, unfortunately, even though she doesn't do a lot.
She's the center of the event.
She is. She is the plot of the movie. The newer princesses, Tiana, Rapunzel, Merida, and Moana, they have redefined women's strength to fit our more modern ideas of, like, you don't have to back down, you don't have to be someone you're not, it's okay to be a leader, a new thinker. And while I like the old princesses and I like the morals and the strength that they show with emotional strength, mental strength, perseverance, a lot, not necessarily physical strength like Merida shows.
Yeah.
I like that even though, there's a lot of princesses, and it's a lot to keep up with, and it can feel stupid at times. I mean, Wreck-It Ralph's second movie did a good job of, like, putting all of the princesses in a room and, like, making fun of them.
I mean, Shrek did that too.
Shrek also did a good job of it. Despite it feeling stupid at times, it is nice to have female leads, even if they don't feel like our modern interpretation of strength. Yeah. Because at least one of the princesses will have a value that you identify with, or that you feel like you could learn from.
And maybe that's the difference between, like, modern and the classical, and especially Brave, is because a lot of the other ones are based off of either real people or historic fairy tales that they still have to play out the way somewhat around the fairy tale.
Yeah, they tried to keep the original ending at least. Yeah.
And Brave is its own thing. And I think that's what really sets it out from other Disney princess movies.
Yeah, with the exception of Moana, most of the original Disney Big 12, their story, at least, comes from somewhere specific. Granted, they broke a lot of traditions with it, especially Tiana and Princess and the Frog, but, like, it worked, and they still had a backbone to build off of.
Okay.
Merida and her story in Brave, they're an original story.
Yeah. No, I think that's something to think about, I guess, when going back and looking at some of these Disney movies, just because, I mean, I do want to go back into them, especially with family and friends.
Oh, sure.
Having kids in the future, just because it's something I will have to be around, and
sure.
I would like to have a better understanding and appreciation for it.
Oh, sure. And I'm not by any means saying that the old Disney stuff and the old Pixar stuff doesn't need to be torn to shreds, because there is some hot problems going on in a lot of them.
Yes.
But I do think that a lot of the problems that especially the big click articles have picked up on, that's not actually a problem in the film if you actually watch them.
No, and even if it is a problem or an element from the old movie or from the original story tale, I can tell you the original story is worse.
Yeah. And also, like, it is one of those questions on, is having one princess define all little girls really a good idea?
Yeah.
Probably not.
No.
There's 12 official, I think there's like 26 unofficial.
Yeah.
And, like, yeah, that feels like a lot, but, like, honestly, when I was a little kid, I didn't really love any of them. I liked Pocahontas for a while. I liked Nala. Nala was my favorite Disney girl. I thought she was badass and cool.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah, and so, like, having more representation, having more princesses, yeah, it can feel gimmicky. Yeah, it can feel really overwhelming, especially if you have a little girl who's into princesses. Yeah. I totally get it. I've babysat kids who, like, that was their obsession, that was their passion, was Disney princesses.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, not every little kid's obsessed with all of them. Usually they pick one.
Yeah, I can see that. So, one little other side bit of trivia.
Yes.
Because I think for us to really go even further into the Disney Princess, that will have to be its own multi-part episode series.
So much to unpack with the princesses.
Yeah, that's for something else. I just wanted to get a little bit of an overview of how Brave stacks up in comparison to what our standards are.
Yeah.
Just side little note, Brave was the first movie to use Dolby Atmos sound.
Yes, it was.
Weird choice.
Very. But you know what? I don't think it's hurt it in the long run.
No.
Mostly because at this point, most people listen to it at home.
Yep, exactly. So, at the end of it all, after we've doubled the length of the movie's runtime.
Of course.
What are your final thoughts, and would you recommend Brave?
I would definitely recommend Brave. Even if you don't have a kid in your house that wants to watch this movie, this is a good standalone movie.
Yeah.
It's not too Disney, it's not too Pixar-y, it's just a solid animated film.
Yeah.
If you have, though, a kid in your home, especially a young girl, especially one who's about this age, this is a really solid starting block for a lot of development. But also, I do recommend watching this film and digging more into the princesses, their history, and Brave's history, and their creators' different histories. There's a lot more that we didn't get to touch here. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the thing with animated films that I forget. There is so much work in detailing that goes into it that... Yeah, there really is. Are all separate little segments. And even me, being a man... A dude. I remember after watching this with you guys that I immediately texted my mom and said, even though this is a mother-daughter movie, I think this is a good one to watch together at some point, because it is, even if you take the gender out of it, it's a good movie about communicating the changing of times. And it also kind of, especially even if you're a person who's becoming an adult and you don't have kids, you do, as an adult, kind of forget to have fun sometimes and to let yourself go ride around with your hair blowing in the breeze, shooting arrows into the sunset. Yes, exactly. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think we can both unequivocally, or I forgot what word I was trying to say. I think we can both agree that Brave is a movie that should be watched. Like, definitely. Even if you're not a Disney fan, even if you're not a princess movie fan, because it doesn't feel like a princess movie. It just feels like a good
wholesome movie.
Yeah, definitely.
So, anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
Happy Mother's Day.
Woo-hoo.
Peace.